Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Manipulating wooden tendrils. Don't lump me in with that beast. This is a combination of Orochimaru's and Denzo's research. I'm merely making use of their leftovers. Before Yamato became widely known, there were almost no recorded users of wood style in the ninja world. But as the research advanced, more and more shinobi acquired wood style. The Uchiha were particularly compatible with the technique, boasting a high success rate when receiving wood style transplants. The third Hokage found Shizue's explanation difficult to believe, but at this point, the truth hardly mattered. If he couldn't defeat Shizue Uchiha here, then both he and the village were doomed. Forming hand seals, he summoned 4 shadow clones and prepared a powerful combination technique. 5-style great consecutive bullets. A massive surge of chakra erupted as 5 different elemental attacks were unleashed simultaneously, colliding in a brilliant explosion. A towering mushroom cloud rose into the sky, drawing the attention of the Hidden Leaf villagers. Fear gripped their hearts as they turned to see the battle's epicenter. At that moment, root operatives appeared among them, swiftly evacuating the civilians from the area. At the same time, the root operatives also prevented Hidden Leaf village's shinobi from rushing in to provide assistance. Shizue endured the full impact of the 5-style great consecutive bullets using his Susanoo, but beads of sweat formed on his forehead. He couldn't help but acknowledge the third Hokage's strength. Even after more than a decade without actively taking on missions, Hiruzen Sarutobi still maintained the combat prowess worthy of a Hokage. His chakra reserves were astonishing, almost comparable to Shizue himself, who had Hashirama cells implanted. Taking him down would be no easy feat. However, if the third Hokage managed to escape, both the Uchiha and Root would be hunted down like rats, unable to remain in Hidden Leaf village any longer. The third Hokage, too, was drenched in sweat. He hadn't expected Shizue to be this powerful, so strong that conventional ninjutsu had little effect on him. Even the special techniques he had prepared in advance weren't particularly useful against him. The Reaper Death Seal was indeed the strongest sealing technique of the Uzumaki clan, but its effectiveness against living enemies was limited. Moreover, even if he took Shizue down with him, Orochimaru would still be a looming threat. With no way to ensure mutual destruction, his only option was to escape. If he could regroup with the main forces, then with Jiraiya's help, he could put an end to this Hidden Leaf village rebellion. Just as the third Hokage was making his desperate retreat, 2 figures appeared in his path. They wore the same masks as the root operatives, yet their strikingly vibrant red hair set them apart. Though it was only the 2 of them standing there, it felt as if they commanded an entire army behind them. Faced with these mysterious women, the third Hokage halted his steps. He glanced behind at Shizue, who was still in pursuit, then turned back to the 2 unknown Kunoichi. He wasn't sure whether they were enemies or allies. Shizue, too, grimaced at their sudden appearance. At that moment, one of the mysterious women spoke. Shizue Uchiha, send your men to repel Orochimaru's attack. It's time to put an end to this farce. Shizue was momentarily stunned, then seemed to realize something. Without hesitation, he ordered his men to reinforce Hidden Leaf village's defense forces. There were only a handful of people who could identify him at this moment, and aside from Byakuya himself, only his closest confidants could do so. Moreover, he recognized the emblem of the Uzumaki clan and knew of Byakuya's connection to them. With the root operatives gone, the 3 of them encircled the third Hokage. Hiruzen still wanted to resist, but golden chains suddenly materialized from the air, blocking his path. He had confidence that he could shatter these chakra-forged chains, but he no longer felt the will to fight. The golden chains, adamantine sealing chains, were an unmistakable mark of the Uzumaki clan. This was a secret technique exclusive to them, one that only Uzumaki shinobi could wield. Adding that to Shizue's Sharingan and wood style, the third Hokage suddenly found himself questioning everything. Had I truly made a mistake somewhere? Otherwise, why would a group of shinobi, possessing the powers of the Senju, Uchiha, and Uzumaki, all stand against me? With a heavy clang, the third Hokage let go of his staff. As the staff hit the ground, it transformed back into Inma, who appeared at Hiruzen's side with a confused expression. Hiruzen, why are you giving up? We can still fight. The third Hokage shook his head, his voice quiet but firm. There's no need to fight any longer. The shinobi standing before me are not enemies. They are comrades of the village. Shizue is Kagami's grandson. Orochimaru is my student. The Uzumaki clan has always been Hidden Leaf Village's ally. And haven't you noticed? His voice grew heavier. I've been fighting here for so long. Yet Hidden Leaf Village has elite Jonin still haven't arrived to support me. That means they, too, have abandoned me. Since everyone believes I can no longer be Hokage, there's no reason for me to keep fighting. By letting go now, I can minimize the village's losses. I trust they won't harm Hidden Leaf Village. One sacrifice is enough. Hearing this, Shizue sneered. Your final words sound far more pleasant than Denzo's. That fool still believed he was right even after his defeat. Utterly hopeless. Oh? Then I suppose I'm still better than Denzo, after all. The third Hokage chuckled softly, then turned his gaze toward the two mysterious kunoichi nearby. Shizue's identity has already been revealed. What about you two? Can't you at least tell a dying man who you are? Kushina shook her head, and Karen answered in her place. Apologies, third Hokage. Orochimaru has just used summoning, impure world reincarnation. We can't afford to reveal anything. In this world, not even the dead can keep secrets. With that, Kushina and Karen moved in unison, their adamantine sealing chains binding the third Hokage. Shizue stepped forward, casting a Genjutsu that sent him into unconsciousness, stripping him of any further ability to resist. Once he had collapsed, Kushina removed her mask and turned to Shizue. Shizue, what do you plan to do with him? He made a lot of mistakes, but once. He was a good Hokage. Shizue glanced at Kushina, immediately recognizing her identity. The woman who was believed to have died when the tail beast was extracted from her was now standing before him, alive and well. But to him, it was hardly shocking anymore. If he himself had faked his death and survived, then why couldn't Kushina? Even if she had truly died, he believed Byakuya-sama could bring back the dead. In his eyes, Byakuya was no different from the Sage of Six Paths, a walking god in the shinobi world. After a brief moment of silence, Shizue answered. I'll send the third Hokage to accompany Denzo. Byakuya-sama already decided this long ago. What about you, Lady Kushina? What do you plan to do next? He paused before asking, are you planning to step into the light and control Hidden Leaf Village as the Hokage's wife? Chapter 382, Hokage's questions and answers. Shizue's words made Kushina pause. She turned around slowly and said. Even you don't want to be Hokage, choosing instead to remain in the shadows as Hidden Leaf Village's roots. Do you think I would care about the position or the power that comes with it? She sighed. But Hidden Leaf Village today is disappointing. If Minato were leading the village, it would never have ended up like this. But Minato is gone for good. Seeing that Kushina had no interest in the Hokage seat either, Shizue felt a mix of emotions. The once coveted title of Hokage was now something that people like them actively avoided. Not just him and Kushina, Tsunade and Jiraiya were the same. Letting out a quiet sigh, Shizue spoke. If you don't want to be Hokage, then it'll have to be either Jiraiya or Tsunade. Who do you think should take the position? Kushina glanced at Shizue and replied. That's up to you all. I have no interest in Hidden Leaf Village. Right now, I just want to focus on raising Naruto and making up for the love he lacked in his childhood. For once, I want to be selfish. After saying this, Kushina felt as if a weight had been lifted from her heart. There were many reasons why she didn't want to step forward. For one, she had no way to explain where she had been all these years. She also couldn't risk exposing Akatsuki's secrets. But more than anything, she was simply tired of protecting Hidden Leaf Village. Over a decade ago, she and Minato had given their lives to save the village. Yet, the one who caused the greatest harm to Hidden Leaf Village had come from within. Her clan had been destroyed while Hidden Leaf Village stood by and did nothing. Even after her and Minato's deaths, their son, Naruto, had never been treated as the child of a hero. Maybe it wasn't such a bad thing for Akatsuki, inheritors of the Will of Fire, to take over Hidden Leaf Village. After all, Akatsuki's top leaders, just like Minato, were all Jiraiya-sensei's students. As Kushina disappeared into the streets of Hidden Leaf Village, Shizue looked down at the unconscious third Hokage in his hands. He created several shadow clones before heading toward the root base. Once the third Hokage was dealt with, this farce would finally come to an end. Raza and Sasori were the first to receive the news. The two were locked in battle within the Forest of Death, their attacks tearing apart the landscape with ease. Even Elite Jonan dared not approach the aftermath of their clash. By all logic, Raza's magnet style should have been a natural counter to puppet techniques, disrupting and disabling them. Yet for some reason, some of Sasori's puppets were completely unaffected. Even at a distance of hundreds of meters, they moved as fluidly as ever. Raza quickly realized that there was something off about these puppets. Unlike the others, these particular ones had numerous black rods embedded in them. These rods didn't seem to be made of chakra metal, yet their ability to transmit chakra far surpassed it. What Raza didn't know was that these rods were creations of yin-yang style, naturally suppressing most ninjutsu. This was a gift from Byakuya for Sasori's role in taking control of Hidden Sand Village, a way to ensure that even without his third Kazekage puppet, he could still stand on equal footing with Raza. Although both men were members of Akatsuki on the surface, in truth, they despised each other and would gladly kill one another if given the chance. But because of Byakuya, they were forced to cooperate for now. The reason was simple, everything was for the sake of Hidden Sand Village. If Hidden Sand Village wanted to break free from Hidden Lee Village's influence and reclaim its independence, it needed an undeniable justification that Hidden Lee Village could not refuse. Seeing that he couldn't take down Sasori of the Red Sand, Raza sighed inwardly and occasionally glanced toward Hidden Lee Village's urban district, contemplating the best way to retreat while maximizing Hidden Sand Village's benefits. As the two clashed, a shadow clone of Shisui arrived, appearing beside Sasori. Noticing Denzo's presence, both Sasori and Raza knew that the plan had entered its next phase. After a few feigned attacks, Raza dived into the forest of death, vanishing into the dense foliage. Once Raza was gone, Sasori turned to Shisui and coldly asked, "Denzo, what's the situation with the third Hokage?" Shisui put on an expression of grief and sorrow. The third Hokage was gravely wounded while defending Hidden Lee Village and lost consciousness during the battle. Kazekage Dano, you should join me in avenging him. Hearing this, Sasori frowned slightly. Cut the act. Everyone knows you're one of the key players in the Hidden Lee Village crush plan. Just don't forget our deal when you take over Hidden Lee Village. Hidden Lee Village no longer has the power to suppress Hidden Sand Village. You'd best hurry up and abolish the previous treaty. Shisui glanced at Sasori before responding. We're all under Byakuya-sama, there's no need to be so rigid about these things. I won't take the initiative to revoke the treaty. If you want it gone, send someone to negotiate with Koharu Utatane and Hamor Mitakato. Given the current situation, your demands aren't excessive, they'll agree. Sasori snorted coldly. Even if we both serve Byakuya, Hidden Lee Village and Hidden Sand Village aren't subordinate to each other. I don't believe there will ever be lasting peace between us. We're both acting for the sake of our own villages, there's no need for pretenses. Shisui didn't respond. Instead, he simply formed a hand seal, dispelling his shadow clone into a wisp of white smoke. Meanwhile, Byakuya's battle with the first and second Hokage had reached a critical point. The longer the fight dragged on, the more Hashirama and Obirama could sense Byakuya's overwhelming strength. They couldn't help but admire the fact that the shinobi world still had such powerful successors. After tanking an explosive tag bombardment, Hashirama's reanimated body slowly reassembled itself. Floating midair, Byakuya looked down upon him, and Hashirama found himself growing excited at the thought of going all out against him. With Byakuya's current abilities, even if Hashirama were at his peak, taking him down wouldn't have been an easy task. Byakuya's skill in both ninjutsu and taijutsu had reached the level of Hashirama's youth. His expertise in ganjutsu and sealing techniques was also impressive, reaching at least Kage level. The only thing missing was Sage Mode. Byakuya lacked the ability to harness natural energy, preventing his ninjutsu from reaching their maximum potential. Because of this, he was also unable to use true several thousand hands. Compared to Hashirama's excitement, Tobirama's thoughts were far more complex. He had no idea where this monster named Byakuya had come from. Since the start of their battle, Byakuya had used no fewer than 20 different jutsu. Each one belonged to a different nature transformation, and he had even demonstrated multiple bloodline limit. It was like fighting a one-man army. What was even more terrifying was that Byakuya's body housed all these bloodline limits without any apparent incompatibilities. Just what kind of physique and soul strength did he possess to withstand such contradictions? If Tobirama were still alive, he wouldn't have been able to resist the urge to research Byakuya. If he could uncover the secrets behind Byakuya's abilities, it would greatly advance Hidden Lee Village's bloodline transplantation techniques. With that, Hidden Lee Village's war potential could rise to an entirely new level. However, researching Byakuya was nothing more than a pipe dream for the second Hokage. He was just a dead man, lacking the power to take Byakuya down. Even if he did manage to capture him, it would only be a gift to the monkey's disciples. At that moment, Tobirama seemed to realize something and turned his gaze into the distance. The monkey had been gone for quite some time now. Why hadn't he returned with reinforcements? No matter how many battles were happening elsewhere, nothing should be more important than this one. And where were Denzo, Koharu, and Hamura? Had they already perished in the earlier conflicts? After once again blasting Tobirama's reanimated body apart, Byakuya turned toward Orochimaru in the distance and said, "Orochimaru, are these two dead men the only reinforcements you have? Where are the others?" Orochimaru, who had been watching the entire battle unfold, paled. He was genuinely afraid of Byakuya's combat strength. Even though he was currently one of Byakuya's subordinates, he had summoned none other than the first and second Hokage. Even at only half their original strength, they should have been overwhelmingly powerful. As Hashirama's body regenerated, he glanced at the shaken Orochimaru, then at Byakuya, and slowly spoke. "You over there, the monkey's student, you must be Orochimaru. Since even with Tobirama and me under your control, you still can't defeat Byakuya, why don't you two just talk things out? I don't see why you need to attack Hidden Leaf Village just because you left it. Aniki? The fuck?" Tobirama's expression shifted. He knew all too well that his brother was always the first to suggest sitting down and talking things out. But things weren't like they used to be. They no longer held absolute military superiority. Back in their time, the only reason the other four great villages visited Hidden Leaf Village and calmly attended the tail beast distribution talks was the sheer power of Hashirama and Madara. Byakuya suddenly laughed. "That works for me. I was just thinking about having a chat with Orochimaru-sama. I'm not a Hidden Leaf Village shinobi, after all, meeting with Hidden Leaf Village's fifth Hokage in advance doesn't sound bad." Hearing this, Hashirama's expression darkened. Tobirama's face instantly turned ice cold. If Byakuya and Orochimaru truly joined forces, Hidden Leaf Village would be in grave danger. It might even be broken up into smaller, weaker villages. Wait. Fifth Hokage? Did that mean there had been a fourth Hokage? With that thought, Tobirama crossed his arms and asked in a cold voice, "You over there, kid, did the village really have a fourth Hokage?" Byakuya nodded, his tone laced with amusement. "Yes, Hidden Leaf Village had a fourth Hokage. But he's already dead. This man, Orochimaru, was one of the candidates for fourth Hokage, but unfortunately, he lost to Minato. Orochimaru was a Hokage candidate?" Both Hashirama and Tobirama's minds began racing. Hashirama thought of Madara. Back then, after their falling out, Madara had left the village. When he returned, he brought the Nine Tails with him and started talking about the future. Could Orochimaru's situation be similar to Madara's? If so, things were going to get complicated. Tobirama, however, focused on a different detail. He turned back to Byakuya and continued questioning him. "Kid, how did the fourth Hokage die? Who killed him?" Before Byakuya could respond, Orochimaru spoke first. "The fourth Hokage died during the Nine Tails incident. Someone manipulated the Nine Tails into attacking the village. To protect Hidden Leaf Village, the fourth Hokage used the Reaper Death Seal and perished along with the Nine Tails." Died to the Nine Tails? Hashirama's expression became somewhat peculiar. He really couldn't imagine a scenario where he would die at the hands of the Nine Tails. Even someone as weak as Tobirama wouldn't fall to the beast. The creature was certainly powerful, but not enough to kill a Senju. Tobirama pressed further. "Someone controlled the Nine Tails. Don't tell me it was the Uchiha." Byakuya nodded. Judging by what happened back then, it was most likely an Uchiha, probably Madara Uchiha. I've fought him several times over the years, and he should have the ability to control the Nine Tails. Unfortunately, he always escapes before I can finish him off." "You've fought Madara Uchiha several times? And you couldn't take him down?" Tobirama scoffed, as if he had just heard a joke. "Listen, kid. I acknowledge your strength, as you might even be on par with me at my peak. But you clearly don't understand Madara's power. If your opponent really was Madara, the one running would be you. Besides, Madara died at my brother's hands. I even kept his body in my lab for research. There's no way he just magically came back to life." Byakuya glanced at Tobirama and smirked. "Well, I suppose he isn't the Madara you remember. But it doesn't matter. As long as he calls himself Madara, he is Madara." At that moment, Hashirama frowned. "Tobirama, why did you experiment on Madara's body?" "Didn't I tell you, Aniki? Shut up." Tobirama cut him off before he could finish. Then, turning to Orochimaru, he asked. "Orochimaru, don't tell me you're working with the Uchiha in this attack? Did you even borrow Madara's power? I know that monkey well enough. If you managed to sneak so many people into Hidden Leaf Village, you must have had help from the inside." At the mention of the Uchiha, Orochimaru paused for a moment before replying, "Second Hokage, let's not talk about my allies for now. The Uchiha clan disbanded years ago. Only 2 or 3 of them remain. The Uchiha only have 2 or 3 members left? Obirama was both shocked and delighted, his emotions tangled as he asked, when did the Uchiha disband? Who did it? Itachi Uchiha. For the sake of the village, he wiped out the entire clan. As he answered Tobirama's question, Orochimaru glanced at Byakuya, waiting for instructions. He was unsure of what to do next and felt trapped in a difficult situation. Upon hearing of the Uchiha's downfall, Hashirama let out a sigh before turning back to Byakuya. Byakuya-kun, your chakra should be almost fully recovered by now. Let's continue our fight. Orochimaru over there has already realized you were stalling for time. Chapter 383, The Fear and Respect of Hidden Leaf Village's Shinobi. As the fierce battle raged across Hidden Leaf Village, an uninvited guest arrived at the Hokage building. With the third Hokage gone and the elite Anbu forces occupied elsewhere, Obito easily infiltrated the building and made his way to the chamber where the Scroll of Seals was kept. His target was a forbidden jutsu inscribed on the scroll, summoning, impure world reincarnation, the technique that could summon the dead from the Pure Land back to the world of the living. Before witnessing Byakuya's battle against the first and second Hokage, Obito had been skeptical of summoning, impure world reincarnation's power. He hadn't believed the technique could pose any real threat to the shinobi of this era. But after seeing Hashirama and Obirama in action, he had made up his mind. He would bring Madara Uchiha back. Madara alone would be enough to deal with the uncontrollable force that was Byakuya and finally bring forth the infinite Tsukuyomi, achieving eternal peace. Stepping into the chamber, Obito flipped open the Scroll of Seals, triggering the barrier traps left behind. With a simple kami phase through, he avoided the trap's attack and successfully obtained the scroll, quickly locating the section detailing summoning, impure world reincarnation. The technique's principle was simple. By using a portion of the deceased's remains, the summoner could link to their soul in the Pure Land and resurrect them into a special vessel. Depending on the quality of the vessel, the revived individual's strength would vary. For Obito, finding a suitable vessel wasn't difficult. The White Zetsu were ideal summoning, impure world reincarnation hosts, as using them would allow the reincarnated shinobi to reach their full potential. Now, all that remained was locating Madara's corpse. The only complication was that Madara had once told him he didn't want to be revived through summoning, impure world reincarnation. He desired a young, living body and had planned to be resurrected through Nagato's Rin rebirth. Obito pushed aside his stray thoughts and left the Hokage building. Before vanishing, he glanced in Byakuya's direction, his eyes deep with meaning. Today's stage belonged to Byakuya, so he wouldn't interfere. But this would be Byakuya's last performance. Once Madara returned, everything would change. The positions of power between them would completely reverse. As time passed, more and more shinobi disengaged from their own battles and turned their attention toward the clash at the arena. Among them were Jiraiya, leading Hidden Leaf Village's defensive forces, and Sasori, commanding the Hidden Sand Village forces. With so many eyes on him, Orochimaru grew increasingly uneasy. After Hashirama and Obirama summoning, impure world reincarnation bodies were once again shattered, Orochimaru made up his mind, he had to retreat. First, he had Hashirama cast the Bringer of Darkness technique, shrouding the battlefield in an impenetrable blackness. Then, under the cover of the darkness, he slipped away into the jungle. Before leaving, he didn't forget to issue a command, ordering the first and second Hokage to continue fighting. When the darkness finally lifted, Jiraiya and the reinforcements squad arrived at the arena. Appearing beside Byakuya with a flicker of movement, Jiraiya asked, "Need a hand, Byakuya? It looks like you're struggling against the first and second Hokage on your own." Byakuya, looking visibly exhausted, shot him an irritated glance. "Jiraiya, do you even need to ask? You know how strong the first and second Hokage are. If they weren't in summoning, impure world reincarnation form, I would have been defeated already." His complaint left Jiraiya momentarily speechless. There was no denying it, setting aside Tobirama, Hashirama had been in a league of his own back in the day. Without his overwhelming strength, the Warring States period would never have ended, and the one nation, one village system would have never been established. The fact that Byakuya had held his own against both Hokage for so long already spoke volumes about his power. Byakuya paused for a moment before continuing. "Oh, right, Jiraiya, do you know what jutsu Orochimaru is using? I've taken down those 2 Hokage of yours countless times, but they keep regenerating so quickly. What exactly does it take to make them stay down?" Jiraiya glanced at Byakuya and replied. "If I'm not mistaken, Orochimaru is using summoning, impure world reincarnation. Shinobi revived by summoning, impure world reincarnation have unlimited chakra and rapid regeneration. The only way to truly defeat them is through sealing techniques." Byakuya frowned. Such a twisted jutsu. How did it even come into existence? At those words, Jiraiya's expression turned a bit awkward. He raised a finger and pointed toward the second Hokage standing not far away. Obirama's face darkened immediately. But under Orochimaru's control, he was unable to speak in his own defense. Oh, so it was Hidden Leaf Village's second Hokage? Then never mind. Byakuya's tone was one of complete indifference. He then added, I've heard stories about the demon of the Senshu, Tobirama. He was no less of a mad scientist than Orochimaru. In any other situation, Hidden Leaf Village's shinobi would have been outraged at such blatant disrespect toward the second Hokage. But Byakuya was simply stating a fact. While Tobirama had indeed established the academy system and helped stabilize the village, his approach to experimentation had been ruthless and utterly pragmatic. After some thought, Byakuya turned to Jiraiya and said, Jiraiya, you take the Hidden Leaf Village shinobi and deal with the second Hokage. I'll handle sealing the first Hokage myself. Jiraiya nodded and immediately led Hidden Leaf Village's forces to engage Tobirama. With the help of the Sealing Corps and the older Inoshikacho trio, they quickly managed to suppress the second Hokage. Tobirama, now restrained, glanced at the young shinobi holding him down, his gaze filled with a complicated mix of emotions. Even after his death, Hidden Leaf Village had produced some truly skilled ninja. Meanwhile, Byakuya engaged Hashirama in close combat, swiftly weaving golden adamantine sealing chains toward him, restricting his movements. Just as Hashirama prepared to counter, a sudden shift occurred. From outside the village, Orochimaru, having already fled, chose to release summoning, impure world reincarnation. As the technique unraveled, Hashirama and Obirama's bodies began to crumble, their souls drifting upward toward the sky, returning to the Pure Land. At that moment, Tobirama raised his hand, intending to use summoning, impure world reincarnation, release, a hidden failsafe known only to the jutsu's creator. By activating this technique at the moment of summoning, impure world reincarnation's cancellation, a summoned soul could resist being sent back to the Pure Land and instead remain in the living world as a free summoning, impure world reincarnation body. Hashirama noticed Obirama's actions and immediately spoke up. Obirama, stop. We're already dead. We shouldn't interfere with the affairs of the living. Obirama frowned. But the shinobi world still needs us. That damn Orochimaru is still out there, and that Uchiha using Madara's name needs to be dealt with. Hashirama sighed and shook his head. I know Hidden Leaf Village is facing trouble, but if we help once, there will be a second time, and a third. Hidden Leaf Village cannot remain under our shadow forever. If the boundary between life and death continues to blur, the shinobi world will never know peace. Obirama, for all his defiance, had always listened to his older brother in the most crucial moments. This was precisely why he was the second Hokage and not the first. As Hashirama's summoning, impure world reincarnation body faded, he cast one last glance at Byakuya, his expression unreadable. Byakuya noticed, but he said nothing. He simply stood there in silence, watching the two great Hokage vanish from the world once more. With the first and second Hokage finally dealt with, the tension that had gripped Hidden Leaf Village's shinobi began to ease. When they turned to look at Byakuya, their eyes were filled with a new kind of respect, one that bordered on reverence. Before, they had heard of Byakuya's strength, knowing he was powerful enough to be considered for Hokage. But hearing was one thing. Seeing was another. And now that they had witnessed his strength firsthand, they finally understood just how terrifyingly strong he was. Over the years, Hidden Leaf Village's shinobi had poured immense effort into barely sealing the second Hokage. Yet, Byakuya had managed to withstand both Hokage simultaneously, even launching counterattacks. Now, with the first and second Hokage's summoning, impure world reincarnation bodies finally defeated, Sasori had also stabilized Gaara, who had gone berserk earlier. When it came to handling Shukaku, Sasori had no shortage of experience. After dispelling the Ganjutsu that had affected Gaara, the one tail naturally returned to his body. At that moment, Jiraiya and the others suddenly realized something and turned to Byakuya. Byakuya, where is the Hokage? In a crisis like this, the Hokage should have made an appearance. Byakuya looked just as confused. He glanced at Jiraiya and said, didn't the Hokage go to find you for backup? You mean you haven't seen him? Jiraiya and the Inoshikacho trio exchanged uncertain glances, their expressions turning thoughtful. For years, they had disagreed with the third Hokage on various policies. However, their differences were merely political, none of them had ever doubted his commitment to Hidden Leaf Village. Yet now, with the external threat resolved, Hiruzen Sarutobi was nowhere to be found. Could it be that Orochimaru's true target hadn't been the village at all, but rather the third Hokage himself? Had this entire attack been nothing more than a distraction, allowing Orochimaru to assassinate the Hokage in the chaos? Jiraiya's expression darkened at the thought. Without hesitation, he ordered Hidden Leaf Village's forces to search for Hiruzen. The village had already lost one Hokage 10 years ago. They couldn't afford to lose another. Just then, Shisui arrived with a squad of root shinobi. Seeing Shisui, his body still wrapped in bandages, the surrounding shinobi frowned in disapproval. Their dislike wasn't directed at him personally but at Denzo and Root as a whole. Despite some improvements in Root's reputation over the years, the organization had long been infamous within Hidden Leaf Village. And now, after arriving so late to the battlefield, they were drawing even more suspicion. Ignoring the wary gazes, Shisui walked up to Jiraiya and said, "We encountered Orochimaru's elite forces earlier, so we were delayed. Did you manage to capture him?" The Hidden Leaf Village shinobi shook their heads. Upon seeing their expressions, Shisui frowned and muttered. "You mean to tell me you couldn't even take down Emir Orochimaru? Looks like Sarutobi really is getting old. At his age, why does he still refuse to step down?" His words weren't particularly loud, but every Hidden Leaf Village shinobi present heard them. None of them spoke. Finally, Jiraiya, unable to hold back, quipped. "Denzo Dano, you're getting up there in age yourself. When will you retire from Root and step away from the Hokage building?" Shisui's face stiffened slightly. "Oh, there's no rush," he replied with a forced smile. "I can still contribute to Hidden Leaf Village. I feel quite young, actually." After exchanging a few more jabs, the shinobi focused on clearing the battlefield and searching for the third Hokage. Meanwhile, Shisui, acting as the Hokage's stand-in, escorted by Akaya and Sasori to a reception room for a small-scale meeting. As an undercover Akatsuki agent within Hidden Leaf Village, Shisui took the opportunity to report his recent achievements. Under his leadership, Root had undergone significant reform. Its influence now reached into nearly every aspect of life in Hidden Leaf Village, transforming it into an immense and deeply rooted presence. And just minutes ago, Shisui, alongside Kushina, had defeated the third Hokage. After delivering his report, Shisui turned to Byakuya and asked, "Byakuya Dano, do you have any further instructions? And regarding the next Hokage, do you have any recommendations?" Byakuya glanced at Shisui and said, "I'm not interested in choosing the next Hokage, but I did promise Kushina that her son, Naruto, would become the Hokage after the next one. As for the fifth Hokage, you all can decide for yourselves. If you want to be Hokage, or if you'd rather someone else take the position, it's up to you. You Uchiha have always wanted to hold the Hokage title, haven't you? It wouldn't be too surprising if Denzo finally fulfilled that ambition." Shisui shook his head. "Me? Becoming Hokage? That's out of the question. The burden of that role is too great. I can't handle it, and neither can anyone else from our side." Byakuya chuckled. "So that means it still comes down to either Tsunade or Jiraiya. What about the Hyuga clan? Do they have any interest in the position?" Shisui shook his head again. "The Hyuga don't have the energy to compete for the Hokage seat. As per your orders, I've been working alongside Hisashi to suppress the main branch and abolish the caged bird system. If things go as planned, within a decade or so, the Hyuga will no longer have caged bird at all." At that moment, Sasori, who had been silent for a while, suddenly spoke up. "Why not make Gaara the Hokage? It's not like Hidden Leaf Village has any outstanding candidates left anyway." Halfway through his sentence, Sasori realized how absurd the idea was and quickly corrected himself. "My real suggestion is that you, Byakuya Dano, should take the Hokage seat. Aren't you a descendant of both the Senju and Uzumaki clans? If you officially joined Hidden Leaf Village, becoming Hokage wouldn't be out of the question." Byakuya shot Sasori a look. His eyes alone made it clear that this conversation was over. Before anyone could press the topic further, Byakuya suddenly sensed something. He turned toward the Hokage building. The barrier he had casually left in the underground vault had been broken. Someone had taken the scroll of seals. Was it Black Zetsu? Or Obito? No longer dwelling on the matter, Byakuya refocused and said, "Let's put the Hokage discussion aside for now. We need to talk about our next move. Right now, we control Hidden Leaf Village, Hidden Sand Village, and Hidden Mist Village. If we can bring Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Clouds Village under our influence, we can form a true shinobi alliance and bring lasting peace to the world." Byakuya then turned serious. "What do you two think? Any good strategies for handling Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Clouds Village?" Chapter 384, High-Level Meeting. The search for the third Hokage had lasted several hours, yet the shinobi of Hidden Leaf Village had found no trace of him. Though they continued their efforts, deep down, they already knew the answer. A shinobi as powerful as the third Hokage would not simply vanish without reason. The most likely explanation was that he had fallen victim to an enemy's plot, sacrificing himself to protect the village. Such tragedies were not unheard of. Years ago, the fourth Hokage and his wife had also disappeared defending Hidden Leaf Village, only to later be confirmed dead. With a quiet sigh, the Anbu captain ordered his subordinates to keep searching while he delivered a report to the Hokage building for the village's higher-ups to review. At the moment, the Hidden Leaf Village leadership was overwhelmed. Not only did they have to deal with the aftermath of Orochimaru's attack, but they also had to placate the dignitaries and wealthy merchants who had attended the Chunin exams. Failing to appease them would only make Hidden Leaf Village's future more difficult. Handling these influential figures naturally fell to Homura Midokado and Koharu Utatane. Though not the most socially adept, their seniority and experience allowed them to manage the situation with practiced ease. A few carefully crafted reassurances were enough to temporarily soothe the guests' concerns. Meanwhile, Jiraiya took charge of hunting down the remaining sound shinobi and rogue ninja hiding within the village, as well as overseeing the conclusion of the Chunin exams. After such a major disruption, continuing the exams was impossible. Fortunately, the top 8 contestants had already been determined in the earlier rounds, at least showcasing the younger generation's strength. When the Anbu captain handed him the report, Jiraiya let out a quiet sigh. As much as he hated to admit it, the chances of the third Hokage still being alive were slim. Orochimaru had gone to extreme lengths to kill his former teacher, setting up assassins in advance and even resorting to the forbidden summoning, impure world reincarnation jutsu. After such unforgivable actions, Jiraiya could no longer find it in himself to forgive Orochimaru. Once the village had a new interim Hokage, he would set out to track down Orochimaru himself and drag him back to answer for his crimes before the old man's spirit. Just then, a Hokage's assistant approached Jiraiya, reminding him to attend a high-level meeting. Jiraiya frowned slightly but nodded. He had little interest in the usual bureaucratic squabbles, but he knew his presence was unavoidable this time. Upon entering the meeting room, he found only 3 others present, the 2 elders, Homura and Koharu, and Denzo, the leader of Root. These 4 represented Hidden Leaf Village's core leadership at the moment, and no other shinobi, not even elite jonin, were permitted to attend. The agenda for this emergency meeting was straightforward, deciding who would serve as interim Hokage and selecting the 5th Hokage candidate. Before Jiraiya could speak, the 2 elders took the initiative. Jiraiya, with Hiruzen currently missing, the role of interim Hokage must fall to you. You're the only one who can shoulder this responsibility. Jiraiya remained silent for a few seconds before nodding. Shizui, who was also present, did not object to the elders' suggestion, tacitly accepting their decision. With the interim Hokage matter settled so quickly, the discussion shifted to broader topics. After a brief pause, Homura Midokado spoke gravely. The foreign dignitaries have been somewhat appeased. They won't demand additional compensation, but we can expect far fewer missions from their affiliates in the future. Jiraiya and Koharu Utatane nodded solemnly. The failure of the Chunin exams and the third Hokage's disappearance had dealt a severe blow to Hidden Leaf Village's reputation. Not only would clients begin doubting the village's capabilities, but the daimyo would likely use this as leverage to cut military funding. Shizui, Denzo, let out a light chuckle and said, "I've always said those outsiders can't be relied on. If Hidden Leaf Village wants to grow stronger, we must replace those merchants and nobles and establish our own industries." Faced with Shizui's sarcasm, the 2 elders could only sigh helplessly. Originally, Root, which had once functioned as a specialized branch of the Anbu, relied on funding from the Hokage's office. But ever since the third Hokage disbanded Root, the organization had found alternative means of financial support. Now, while nominally still under the Anbu's jurisdiction, Root had effectively become semi-independent from Hidden Leaf Village as shinobi forces. Ignoring Shizui's remarks, the 2 elders pulled out the village's damage and casualty reports, passing them around for review. Judging from the data, Hidden Leaf Village's losses, while severe, were still within acceptable limits. Since the battles had taken place outside the residential districts and within the Forest of Death, the village itself had suffered minimal structural damage. The participating shinobi had also avoided heavy casualties, aside from a few unfortunate souls who had fallen to unknown attacks. The greatest loss was the third Hokage himself. And losing their aging, stubborn Hokage might not have been entirely a bad thing for the village. After all, at his age, he would have passed away sooner or later. Perhaps dying in battle to protect Hidden Leaf Village was a more honorable end than wasting away on a sickbed. Come to think of it, was Orochimaru's true goal simply to give his old teacher a dignified death? Dismissing the absurd thought, the group shifted their focus to reconstruction efforts. Thanks to Yamato's wood style, rebuilding wouldn't be much of a challenge. At most, it would take a few weeks for Hidden Leaf Village to return to its former state. After half an hour of discussion, the meeting finally reached its last agenda item, selecting the 5th Hokage. Naturally, Jiraiya, who was already serving as interim Hokage, was the most suitable candidate. In terms of contributions, seniority, and status, he perfectly met all the requirements. However, Jiraiya flatly refused the position and instead proposed hunting down Orochimaru. But without Jiraiya, the village had no other viable candidates for Hokage. As the atmosphere grew tense, Shisui, imitating Denzo's tone, spoke up, since the position of 5th Hokage remains undecided. Perhaps this old man should take the role. I may not compare to the 1st or 2nd Hokage, but I am more than capable of stabilizing the current situation. Unsurprisingly, the two elders immediately vetoed the suggestion. As members of the 2nd Hokage's guard, they believed anyone could become Hokage, except Denzo. If Shisui hadn't been indifferent to the Hokage title, he might have found Denzo's perspective downright pitiable. After decades of toiling for Hidden Leaf Village, Denzo had never even been nominated for Hokage, a perpetual failure in the race for the title. Logically, as fellow failures, Denzo should have sought an alliance with the Uchiha. Yet he had spent his entire career antagonizing them, dragging both sides into an abyss where neither could ever claim the Hokage's seat. Truly, a twisted fate. After a long silence, Jiraiya finally spoke. How about we bring Tsunade back? I think she'd make a better Hokage than me. The two elders exchanged glances and nodded. For now, this was their only option. Shikaku Nara didn't mince words and laid out his analysis. He believed that the primary goal of the rogue ninja Orochimaru in attacking Hidden Leaf Village was to kill the 3rd Hokage, to prove that his own path was not wrong. But Raza's motives were far more puzzling. As a former Kazekage, Raza had no reason to assault Hidden Leaf Village. If his aim was to reclaim his position as the 4th Kazekage, he should have taken advantage of Sasori's departure and attacked Hidden Sand Village instead. Yet Raza had joined forces with Orochimaru to strike Hidden Leaf Village. This suggested a deeper scheme, possibly a coordinated plan between Raza and Sasori to weaken Hidden Leaf Village's strength and force the village to annul its treaties with Hidden Sand Village. Given Raza's former status as Kazekage, this theory held significant weight. However, there was another possibility. Raza might have orchestrated this to sow distrust between Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Sand Village. By doing so, he could ensure that, upon his eventual return to Hidden Sand Village, Hidden Leaf Village would no longer be a reliable ally. More importantly, Shikaku suspected the involvement of the Masked Man. Though the Masked Man hadn't appeared during the Chunin exams, his past manipulation of the 4th Mizukage for years made it highly likely he was pulling strings behind the scenes. After hearing this, the gathered Jonin grew increasingly uneasy about Hidden Leaf Village's future. While the immediate crisis of Hidden Leaf Village's collapse had passed, new threats were already brewing. Did they truly have the strength to protect the village? Among the crowd, Asuma Saratobi was visibly agitated. As the 3rd Hokage's son, he had been rebellious since childhood, resenting the rigid expectations of his lineage. After repeated clashes with his father, he had left to serve as a guardian ninja for the daimyo. Now, with age came understanding, and he had longed to reconcile. But before he could apologize, his father had vanished, without even a body to recover. Meanwhile, Might Guy glanced at Kakashi, his eyes filled with questions. While he mourned the third's disappearance, he couldn't shake Kakashi's earlier words. Kakashi had once asked him, "What matters more, the village, or the Hokage?" That question now seemed eerily prophetic. Even though the Jonin had received intel about Orochimaru's infiltration beforehand, Guy couldn't shake the feeling that Kakashi knew more than he let on. Stepping closer, Guy lowered his voice. "Kakashi. Do you know something? Is the third really dead?" Kakashi met his gaze briefly before replying. "I don't know. I hope he's alive." Truthfully, Kakashi was just as lost. He had assumed that after the third's disappearance, Kushina would step forward to take charge. Yet she remained absent, possibly due to Obito's influence. Or perhaps by Akaya's. Guy studied Kakashi but didn't press further. He trusted his rival's words and saw no deceit in his eyes. Even if Kakashi was hiding something, Guy knew he'd share it when the time was right. That was their bond, a promise forged in the fires of youth. If Kakashi knew Guy's thoughts, he might have laughed bitterly. Because the truth was, he had no answers for Hidden Leaf Village's uncertain future. Meanwhile, at the training grounds, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura stood together, their usual banter replaced by a heavy silence. Just recalling the chaos of the Chunin exams made Sakura shudder. The battles between those elite shinobi, were those even within the realm of normal ninja combat? She was just a gain-in. Why did she keep getting dragged into encounters with monsters? If she faced opponents like that on a real mission, would she even survive long enough to complete it? Her gaze drifted to Naruto and Sasuke, stirring complicated emotions. Even before graduation, she'd known she lagged behind them. At first, She blamed it on lacking a Jonin sensei's guidance. But as time passed, the gap only widened. Enemies she struggled against were effortlessly crushed by Naruto and Sasuke. What could she possibly do to catch up? To avoid becoming deadweight? Overwhelmed, she retreated under a tree, sinking into self-doubt. After a silent glance, Naruto broke the tension. "Hey, Sasuke, wanna spar? Let's see who's improved more." Sasuke nodded, and the two formed the seal of confrontation. As their clash began, Naruto suddenly asked, "Where's the third Hokage really at? And when are you planning to leave with Orochimaru?" Sasuke's eyes sharpened. "How do you know about that?" Naruto shrugged. "Your powers skyrocketed lately. That cursed seal's gotta be involved. Figured you'd ditch the village eventually. You'd pay any price to kill Itachi, right?" Sasuke shook his head. "Wrong. I am seeking Orochimaru. But not for revenge." "Then why?" "To become Hokage." Sasuke's voice was steady. "After I defeat Itachi, I'll be your rival for the title." Naruto blinked, then grinned. "Hey, I won't hand it over. But if you're gonna follow that snake bastard, watch your back." A pause. Then, casually, "Oh, and when's your Uchiha clan stepping out of the shadows? Done hiding?" Chapter 385, Conspiracy Behind the Conspiracy. Hearing this, Sasuke was slightly stunned, a hint of confusion in his eyes. He had only recently learned that the clan had not been annihilated, but had merely gone into hiding. How did Naruto know this information? Could it be that Naruto possessed some kind of mind-reading ability? But after thinking it over, Sasuke gradually came to a realization. During the mission to the Land of Waves, Naruto, like him, had been rescued by a mysterious ninja. The one who saved him was Shisui, so the ninja who saved Naruto must be connected to Naruto in some way. Perhaps the mysterious ninja who saved Naruto belonged to the same faction as Shisui. With that thought, Sasuke shook his head and said, "I don't really know what they're thinking. They don't seem to plan on revealing their identities. It looks like they want to continue lurking in the village. Are you planning to come out into the open on your side?" Naruto also shook his head and said, "No, she doesn't seem to have any intention of showing herself either. I really don't know what they're thinking. They orchestrated this entire operation, yet they're not stepping forward to claim any of the benefits." After this exchange, their sparring session also drew to a close. Sasuke was still no match for Naruto, but he had long since grown used to it. Naruto was the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Until he awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, Sasuke had no chance of surpassing Naruto. Although Naruto didn't look particularly strong, as long as the Nine-Tails within him gave its full support, Naruto could erupt with power comparable to that of the Hokage in a short period of time. Across the entire shinobi world, few could completely suppress him. Despite conversing for so long, the two of them barely discussed the third Hokage's disappearance. Naruto regarded the third Hokage as just a stranger. In the past, he had been grateful for the third Hokage's special care, but once he learned that the old man had deliberately concealed his identity and had been using him all along, any gratitude he felt turned to cold indifference. He neither hated nor particularly liked the third Hokage. In the end, the third Hokage was the epitome of a politician. Sasuke, on the other hand, harbored much deeper resentment toward the third Hokage. From Shisui, he had learned about the third Hokage and the other's suppression of the Uchiha clan, and even about the order given to Itachi Uchiha to carry out the massacre. Maybe the Uchiha really had posed a threat to Hidden Leaf Village's stability. But as the Hokage, failing to resolve internal conflicts within the village was itself a sign of incompetence. What's more, the third Hokage had even tolerated the existence of Shimura Denzo. If it hadn't been for Shisui killing Denzo back then, the Uchiha would have lost more than just their clan name. As time passed, the news of the third Hokage's disappearance could no longer be kept under wraps and gradually spread both inside and outside the village. Within Hidden Leaf Village, when the ninja heard about the third Hokage's disappearance, most of them initially refused to believe it, but they quickly noticed that something was wrong. Could it be that something had really happened to the third Hokage? Under normal circumstances, if the village were attacked, the third Hokage would have stepped up immediately to stabilize the situation. But now, several days had passed, and the third Hokage still hadn't appeared. This made Hidden Leaf Village as shinobi and villagers start to suspect the rumors might actually be true. Soon enough, the Hidden Leaf Village leadership stepped forward to confirm the death of the third Hokage, causing an uproar. The death of the third Hokage, like the death of the fourth Hokage, was a heavy blow to Hidden Leaf Village. But while the fourth Hokage had only ruled for a single year, the third had ruled for several decades. To put it bluntly, the third Hokage had witnessed the lives of most of Hidden Leaf Village's shinobi. Many people refused to believe the third Hokage had died, stubbornly clinging to the hope that he was merely missing. They had no idea who the next Hokage would be or what direction Hidden Leaf Village would take. The foreign candidates participating in the Chunin exams also received the news and promptly sent it back to their respective villages. For the smaller nations in the shinobi world, the death of the third Hokage was a major event. It affected not only their future relations with Hidden Leaf Village, but also the overall balance of power in the shinobi world. They had signed numerous treaties with the third Hokage, and they were uncertain if the next Hokage would uphold them. Onoki of Hidden Stones Village and the fourth Raikage of Hidden Clouds Village were both visibly shocked upon hearing the news of the third Hokage's death. They began to consider whether they should seize this opportunity to attack Hidden Leaf Village. Without the third Hokage, Hidden Leaf Village would undoubtedly fall into chaos as factions scrambled for the position of fifth Hokage. If they moved their forces now, even if they couldn't reach the gates of Hidden Leaf Village, they could still bite off a sizable chunk of land at the borders of the Land of Fire to satisfy their ambitions. However, after careful thought, both Onoki and the fourth Raikage abandoned this plan. They had both tasted defeat at Hidden Leaf Village's hands before, and what's more, Hidden Leaf Village was allied with Hidden Rain Village. Even if Hidden Leaf Village fell into chaos following the third Hokage's death, Hidden Rain Village couldn't be underestimated. Unless Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Clouds Village joined forces, there was no way they could contend with Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Rain Village together. But the chances of Hidden Clouds Village and Hidden Stones Village cooperating were close to zero. The two villages were bitter enemies, and unless faced with the threat of annihilation, they would never form an alliance. Several days later, Hidden Leaf Village held the funeral for the third Hokage. The ceremony took place at the Heroes' Memorial, and just like the fourth Hokage and his wife, the third Hokage's coffin contained no remains, only some of his personal effects. During the funeral, many of Hidden Leaf Village's shinobi wept uncontrollably, recalling their memories of the third Hokage. Some of them had benefited from the third Hokage's kindness, while others had suffered under his oppression. But in this solemn moment, they all simply wanted to quietly send him off on his final journey. After all, from this day onward, the time of the third Hokage had truly come to an end, and no one knew what the future would hold. Watching his own funeral from a distance, the third Hokage's expression was extremely awkward, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He was clearly still alive, yet the Hidden Leaf Village shinobi believed he had died, and they even held a grand funeral for him, allowing him to personally witness his own death. There was nothing more absurd in the entire shinobi world than this. Thinking of this, the third Hokage turned his head to look at Shizue beside him, his heart filled with mixed emotions. That day, after being defeated by the combined efforts of the Uzumaki shinobi and Shizue, he thought he was surely going to die. Even if he didn't die, he would be permanently controlled by Koto Mitsukami, becoming Shizue's puppet. But unexpectedly, Shizue didn't kill him. Instead, he brought him to attend his own funeral. This left the third Hokage unable to see through Shizue anymore. Shizue was no longer that young Uchiha boy, full of the will of fire, whose thoughts the third could easily read. Now, Shizue was the leader of Root, a schemer even more terrifying than Denzo. However, there was one thing the third Hokage couldn't figure out, after his death. Why didn't Shizue try to become the fifth Hokage? Becoming Hokage had always been the dream of the Uchiha clan for decades. Could it be that Shizue and the Uchiha had an even bigger scheme? At that moment, Shizue looked at the third Hokage with a playful expression and said, "Third, how does it feel to attend your own funeral? Besides you, no one else in the shinobi world has ever enjoyed such a privilege." Seeing Shizue take the initiative to mock him, the third Hokage wasn't angered. Instead, he voiced the doubt in his heart. "Shizue, you and Orochimaru joining forces. Was it really just to fake my death?" Shizue glanced at the third Hokage and said, "Killing you was Orochimaru's idea. He's your good disciple, unwilling to see you continue to rot away. He wanted to give you a dignified end." Shizue sighed. "To be honest, I didn't want to take part in Orochimaru's plan, because your existence is the greatest obstacle to Hidden Leaf Village's growth. Keeping you alive weakens Hidden Leaf Village even more." Hearing this, the third Hokage's expression darkened. Shizue's words were truly like a blade to the heart. What did he mean by saying Hidden Leaf Village could continue to be weakened only as long as he lived? If not for him constantly patching up this broken ship called Hidden Leaf Village, it would have sunk long ago. After a moment of silence, the third Hokage said to Shizue, "You say that my being alive weakens Hidden Leaf Village. Then tell me, where exactly did I go wrong over these years? If I hadn't forcibly suppressed the internal conflicts, the village would have already fallen into civil war." The former third Hokage paused before a hint of anger flashing in his eyes. "I deeply regret that I didn't act against the Uchiha earlier. If I had done so when there were signs of rebellion, things wouldn't have come to this. Shizui, do you truly think the Uchiha were completely blameless? I can say for certain, even if your Uchiha clan became Hokage, you wouldn't be able to lead Hidden Leaf Village to strength. You would only cause Hidden Leaf Village to fall apart and not even last this long. Facing the third Hokage's questioning, Shizui responded flatly. Third, I already knew all that you're saying. That's why I never led my clan to start a coup or erase the Uchiha name from Hidden Leaf Village. My clansmen are proud and unstable in their emotions. If they don't experience an unprecedented failure, they will never settle down. That's why I deliberately hid my identity, waiting until we reached the brink of destruction before stepping in to save them, changing their thinking and the Uchiha's future. Pausing, Shizui smiled. The Uchiha alive today will always be feared by Hidden Leaf Village, and with that fear comes the constant risk of annihilation. But a clan that has already been destroyed cannot be destroyed a second time. Once we lose the Uchiha name, only then can we truly integrate into the shinobi world, just like the Senju once did. At the mention of the Senju, the third Hokage fell silent for a few seconds, then fixed his gaze on Shizui and said, Shizui, given that you are now the leader of Root, it's not surprising you would think this way. But I am curious how you managed to defeat Denzo. You shouldn't have been prepared for him. Shizui's heart skipped a beat. Before Denzo's attack, he had blind trust in Hidden Leaf Village. Even when facing a schemer like Denzo, he still had hopes in his heart. If it hadn't been for Byakuya-sama's timely warning, he would never have survived that ordeal. The Uchiha would have been completely wiped out that night by the joint effort of Itachi Uchiha and Denzo. After a moment of contemplation, Shizui feigned calm and said, Third, maybe you've never seen my true face. From the beginning, I have been on guard against all of you. The reason I shared information about Koto Matsukami was only to lure you into my trap. Maybe so. The third Hokage sighed, then said. But I still believe you carry the will of fire. Under your management, Root is completely different from how it was under Denzo. If my disappearance and death can't lead to Hidden Leaf Village's revival, then perhaps it's not a bad thing after all. Shizui sneered and said to the third Hokage. Do you think I kept you alive to let you witness my brilliant methods of saving Hidden Leaf Village from collapse? No, I kept you alive so you could witness Hidden Leaf Village's destruction with your own eyes. The third Hokage's face immediately darkened. You plan to destroy Hidden Leaf Village in front of me? If you have a problem, take it out on me. There's no need to target Hidden Leaf Village. When did I ever say I would target Hidden Leaf Village? Shizui looked at the third Hokage and said. Third, I'm not like you. I won't issue orders to annihilate the Saratobi clan just to get rid of Asuma Saratobi. The Uchiha aren't that petty. Do you remember all the unresolved conflicts from your time in office? They will slowly tear Hidden Leaf Village apart. The third Hokage frowned, unable to understand what Shizui was getting at. Shizui couldn't be bothered to explain any further. After finishing their tour of the third Hokage's funeral, he took the third Hokage back to the Root headquarters. After winding through several corridors, they arrived at the deepest secret chamber. This place was called a secret chamber, but in reality, it was a prison filled with ceiling barriers. No matter day or night, the lights were always on, making it impossible to tell the passage of time. Inside this chamber, the third Hokage saw a familiar figure. This person was none other than his old friend, the former leader of the Root organization, Shimura Denzo. Denzo sat on the tatami mat in the chamber, eyes closed, his face expressionless. If not for the slight rise and fall of his chest, indicating he was still breathing and refining chakra, the third Hokage would have thought his old friend was already dead. However, why had Shizui spared Denzo? And why had he brought him here? Could it be just to let him and Denzo meet, to exchange thoughts and compare their strengths, merely to satisfy Shizui's twisted amusement? If Shizui knew what the third Hokage was thinking, he would certainly deny it outright. What he was about to do next was part of a revenge plan he had devised after consulting with Byakuya-sama. Byakuya-sama had told him exactly what the third Hokage and Denzo valued the most. As the third Hokage was speculating about Shizui's intentions, Denzo suddenly opened his eyes. He glanced at Shizui beside the third Hokage, then at the third Hokage himself, and smiled as he said. Shizui, you've done well. Not only did you join forces with Orochimaru to defeat Hiruzen Saratobi, but you even captured him alive and brought him here. Once I become Hokage, I will definitely let you rebuild the Uchiha clan. The third Hokage was momentarily stunned, while Shizui lowered his head and replied respectfully. Yes, Denzo Dano. As long as I can rebuild the Uchiha clan, I am willing to offer my life to Denzo Dano, even unto death. Hearing this, the third Hokage's heart was shaken. Could it be that everything Shizui had just told him was a lie? That Shizui had not, in fact, turned against Denzo. That all of this was Denzo's plan from the beginning, that Denzo had secretly taken control of the Uchiha clan and even formed an alliance with Orochimaru? Was everything part of Denzo's scheme to become Hokage? Chapter 386, Denzo and Madara Uchiha. While the third Hokage was lost in his chaotic thoughts, Denzo's gaze swept over him. With a playful look, Denzo's lips curved into a faint smile. Hiruzen, it seems this time, I've won. You, who have already fallen among the dead, can no longer stop me from becoming the Hokage of the village and leading Hidden Leaf Village to even greater heights. That familiar tone confirmed Denzo's identity in the third Hokage's mind. He frowned deeply and questioned. Denzo, just to become Hokage, are you really willing to go this far? You even colluded with outside enemies to attack the village. Denzo's gaze grew colder as he fixed it on the third Hokage. Orochimaru was someone you personally let escape. Raza, too, is the result of you nurturing a tiger that would turn on you. Do you remember when I proposed to completely control Hidden Sand Village? You rejected my suggestion. You stopped Orochimaru's human experimentation, yet you openly enjoyed the results of those experiments by bringing Yamato into the Anbu, making him part of your personal forces. Staring at Denzo, the third Hokage frowned tightly and said, So it was you meddling in the wood-style project after all? Do you realize your actions go against the will of fire? Do you think I didn't know the wood-style experiments could increase the village's strength? If you all hadn't laid hands on the nearby citizens of the Land of Fire, would I have intervened? Third snorted. If I had turned a blind eye to your actions, what would the outside world think of Hidden Leaf Village once they found out? What would the daimyo think of Hidden Leaf Village? If the ninjas within the village began to doubt the will of fire, do you know what kind of consequences that would bring? You've never considered this problem. That's exactly why, back then, Tobirama-sensei chose me and not you. Your vision is always so narrow, never considering the consequences. Perhaps because he had attended his own funeral, the third Hokage was in a terrible mood. He directly argued with Denzo, letting out all the resentment that had built up in his heart over the years. Denzo fell silent for a few seconds. He knew the third Hokage's words were facts, but that didn't mean he agreed. After taking a deep breath, Denzo spoke. Hiruzen Saratobi, you're just being foolishly soft-hearted. For the future development of the village, we have to sacrifice the interests of a small portion of people. Besides, you haven't fully upheld the will of fire either. You've done many things that betray your own conscience. Back then, why didn't you send reinforcements to Hinedi village? When Sakamo Hatake failed his mission, why didn't you offer him protection? Wasn't he always practicing the will of fire? Facing Denzo's retort, the third Hokage found himself at a loss. He had indeed failed to send forces to support Hinedi village and failed to shield Sakamo Hatake from the rumors. These were major regrets of his time as Hokage. But Hinedi village was far from Hidden Leaf village, and they simply hadn't had the time to send aid. As for what happened to the White Fang of Hidden Leaf village, that had been a complete accident. Who would have thought that someone like Sakamo Hatake, an elite jonin of Hidden Leaf village, would choose to end his own life over such a trivial matter? After arguing for a while, Saratobi Hiruzen was just about to use his authority as Hokage to suppress Denzo, when it suddenly hit him that he was no longer the Hokage of Hidden Leaf village but a prisoner inside root space. Denzo noticed this too, and with a playful tone, he said, Hiruzen, soon I'll be the Hokage. This time, you won't be able to make me regret anything. I'll defeat Jiraiya and Tsunade and become the fifth Hokage. With that, Denzo ordered Shizue to lock Hiruzen in the secret chamber, then turned and left route. After Denzo left, Hiruzen glanced at Shizue and sighed softly, not bothering to criticize Denzo's actions too much. As a seasoned ninja, he was highly sensitive to chakra, especially when prepared. He could feel another type of chakra on Denzo, traces of Genjutsu. If nothing unexpected had happened, it should be Shizue, the wielder of Kodoa Mitsukami, who had cast Genjutsu on Denzo. And it seemed that this old friend of his hadn't even realized that he had become a puppet. That was exactly the terror of Kodoa Mitsukami. Even though it could be broken by a skilled Genjutsu user, before it was dispelled, it could silently rewrite a person's will. Now, the one with the altered will was Denzo. In the future, it could very well be himself. After leaving the root base, Denzo instinctively stuck to the shadows as he made his way toward the Hokage building. Soon, Denzo noticed his habit of traveling through the shadows and forcibly corrected himself to walk in the middle of the road, the most conspicuous place. He was, after all, about to become the Hokage. He couldn't continue acting like he used to. As he moved forward, memories of the years spent lying in wait surfaced in Denzo's mind. A few years ago, When he tried to seize Kotoa Mitsukami from Shizui, it seemed that Shizui had anticipated this and used Kotoa Mitsukami on him instead. Unfortunately for Shizui, Denzo had long since mastered Uchiha's secret technique to rebound Genjutsu. The Kotoa Mitsukami, originally intended to alter his own will, ended up backfiring on Shizui, turning him into Denzo's most capable subordinate. In the time that followed, he manipulated Itachi Uchiha into moving against the Uchiha clan. The many Sharinganais he had collected from the Uchiha clan were used in experiments, propelling the progress of the wood-style experiments to new heights and allowing Root to surpass Anbu for the first time in strength. Now, by borrowing Orochimaru's hand to eliminate Sarutobi Hiruzen, he had removed his greatest obstacle. With the old fox Hiruzen gone, Jiraiya and Tsunade would never be able to stop him. It was only a matter of time before he took the seat of Hokage. The reason he didn't kill Sarutobi Hiruzen but instead let him live was actually very simple. The two had been old friends for decades. Denzo didn't want the third Hokage to die, he wanted him to personally witness his leadership, to realize his own mistakes. Pulling his thoughts back from wandering, Denzo began to seriously consider his path to becoming Hokage. Although he looked down on Jiraiya and Tsunade strategically, Denzo never underestimated them tactically. There was no need to say much about Jiraiya. If he had been willing to become Hokage, he would have taken the position long ago. Tsunade was much the same. As long as she was willing, she could become Hokage at any time. Denzo had to stop Tsunade from returning to the village. At the very least, before she returned, he needed to secure the nomination for Hokage and seize the position first. To ensure nothing went wrong, he had to take control of the fire daimyo as well. Although the daimyo was protected by the 12 guardian ninja, with Shizui's abilities, it wasn't impossible to control the daimyo of the land of fire. Everything was within his grasp. With these thoughts in mind, Denzo slowly walked into the Hokage building and began his performance. After the Chunin exams ended, Byakuya didn't immediately leave Hidden Leaf Village. Although the Hidden Leaf Village crush plan targeting the third Hokage had came to an end, the plan against the entire Hidden Leaf Village had just begun. Denzo was the ultimate weapon against Hidden Leaf Village. Hidden Leaf Village was different from Hidden Sand Village or Hidden Mist Village. It was very difficult to bring it under Akatsuki's control through conventional means. The reason was simple. In Hidden Sand Village, only Raza had the qualifications to become Kazekage, so after defeating Raza and Shukaku, Sasori naturally became Kazekage. As for Hidden Mist Village, the highest leader was Genji, and it was even easier to reach an agreement with him. But the situation in Hidden Leaf Village was different. There were too many ninja qualified to become Hokage. Jiraiya, Tsunade, Denzo, and even Orochimaru all had the qualifications. Among them, Orochimaru and Kushina had clearly refused the position of Hokage. Their hearts were no longer with Hidden Leaf Village. That fool Jiraiya had close ties with Mount Myabaku. For now, it was best not to involve the people of the three great sage regions, to avoid raising suspicions with Gamamaru. On the other hand, both Haku and Kimimaro, who had been watching from the sidelines and hadn't even made it in time for the finals, also stayed behind for the time being. When they observed Naruto and Gaara, thoughts of fighting sparked in their hearts as they wondered who among them was the strongest in the Chunin exams. Unfortunately, before the finals could begin, Byakuya-sama's plan had already started in haste. The chaos of the battlefield left them at a loss, not knowing whether to help Orochimaru or the Hidden Leaf Village ninja. Only after it all ended did they realize that Byakuya-sama hadn't even participated personally. Byakuya occasionally glanced in the direction of the Hokage building, with a sharp gleam flashing in his eyes. On the border of the Land of Fire, after spending several days, Obito successfully mastered Edo Tensei technique. Using the information and tissues from the deceased, Obito successfully performed Edo Tensei, this time reviving a Jonin from Hidden Leaf Village. After completing the summoning, Obito personally tested the strength of the reanimated Jonin. Compared to when he was alive, the reanimated body's explosive power had significantly decreased. However, Edo Tensei had also covered many of the Jonin's weaknesses, making the reanimated body extremely difficult to defeat completely. Soon, Obito found the Jonin's weaknesses and managed to defeat him. After the test, Obito planned to cultivate more White Zetsu clones and reanimated bodies. As long as he had enough White Zetsu and ninja under his control, he could openly challenge the 5 great shinobi villages. However, the success of Edo Tensei also made Obito a bit hesitant. He wasn't sure when he would be able to defeat Byakuya, nor was he certain whether he should resurrect Rin and Madara. As for Madara, there was no question, he had already prepared everything before his death. But would Rin really want to be brought back to life through Edo Tensei? Should he really let Rin experience the hell that was the shinobi world all over again? It would be too cruel for her. After pondering for a long time, Obito ultimately gave up on reincarnating Rin. He didn't want her to suffer, nor did he want to shake his belief in the infinite Tsukimi plan. Using the teleportation jutsu, Obito headed toward the Land of Grass. Within the Land of Grass, there was a base that Madara Uchiha had left behind, containing many Uchiha treasures, as well as the body Madara had prepared for his own resurrection. Passing through the walls using Kami, Obito found Madara's corpse underground. Unlike the old Madara who had taught him over a decade ago, this body was in its prime, with little difference from an ordinary living body. Once he used the Rin rebirth technique, the difference between old Madara and prime Madara would be like night and day. The elderly Madara Uchiha could only use less than half of his original strength and wasn't enough to deal with Byakuya, but prime Madara Uchiha could easily crush him. At that moment, Black Zetsu also arrived at the secret chamber. Seeing that Obito was about to perform Edo Tensei, he said to him, "Obito, you've forgotten your agreement with Madara-sama. To resurrect Madara Uchiha-sama, you must use the Rin rebirth technique." As the embodiment of Madara Uchiha's will, Black Zetsu naturally appeared to be loyal to Madara Uchiha on the surface, earnestly hoping for Madara's complete return to the shinobi world. But in truth, Black Zetsu had absolutely no intention of allowing Madara's resurrection. Madara was indeed the previous incarnation of Indra, there was no mistake about that. Black Zetsu had always been cooperating with Indra's reincarnations. However, unlike other incarnations of Indra, Madara Uchiha was an Uchiha who was deeply cunning and scheming, having successfully escaped death at the hands of Ashura. And that wasn't all. Despite possessing power strong enough to crush half the shinobi world, Madara still chose to lie low in Hidden Leaf Village, not acting recklessly. This made Black Zetsu start to doubt, to wonder if Madara had already begun to suspect something. Obito glanced at Black Zetsu, secretly thinking to himself, if it weren't for you recruiting Byakuya, would I have ended up in such a miserable state? If I don't find Madara Uchiha as an ally soon, the next unlucky shinobi will be me. I'm no match for Byakuya. Taking a deep breath, Obito said to Black Zetsu, "I also want to use the Rin rebirth technique, but I haven't had a chance to strike at Nagato and take our Rinnegan. Right now, Byakuya's power has completely slipped from our control. We must find a powerful counterbalance, and that person can only be Madara Uchiha." Black Zetsu glanced at Obito. He had a secret contact with Byakuya, so he didn't care about the conflict between Obito and Byakuya. No matter who won between Byakuya and Obito, in the end, they would both become his pawns. However, to keep Obito deceived, Black Zetsu still nodded and said, "Of course, we can resurrect Madara Uchiha, but we need to prepare a special vessel for him. I happen to have a few white Zetsu that can serve as sacrifices." As he spoke, Black Zetsu clapped his hands, summoning his subordinates to bring over suitable vessels. The vessel Black Zetsu found was indeed one of the white Zetsu, and not just any one, but one of the stronger ones. If Madara Uchiha could be revived using this vessel, he would be able to unleash at least 80% of his original power. As a cloud of blue smoke dissipated, the white Zetsu on the ground transformed into sheets of paper, which quickly gathered and finally formed the shape of Madara Uchiha. Madara Uchiha slowly opened his eyes, looked around, and then looked at himself. When he saw that his body was only that of an summoning, impure world reincarnation, Madara showed a displeased expression. He turned to Black Zetsu and Obito, and spoke with clear dissatisfaction. "I remember telling you that I didn't want to be revived this way. What I desire is a complete resurrection, one with a living body of flesh and blood." Hearing this, both Black Zetsu and Obito remained silent. Seeing their silence, Madara let out a cold snort and then asked about the other parts of the plan. "What about Nagato? And the tailed beasts you've been collecting? So many years have passed, surely you haven't made no progress at all, have you?" This time, Black Zetsu and Obito exchanged a glance, then replied, "Madara-sama, we've been following your plan all along, but many unforeseen complications have arisen along the way. You still remember Byakuya from Akatsuki, don't you?" Chapter 387, Denzo's thoughts on the future. When the Akatsuki's Byakuya was mentioned, Madara Uchiha became somewhat intrigued. He still remembered that, before his slumber, he had paid attention to this young member of the Akatsuki. Byakuya's personality and methods had left a deep impression on him. If Byakuya had possessed the Uchiha bloodline, Madara might have even given up on Obito and focused on cultivating Byakuya instead. Thinking of this, Madara said with interest, "Of course I remember. During my slumber, did that kid Byakuya accomplish something earth-shattering?" Obito's face changed slightly, as if something precious had been taken from him, and he replied, "Byakuya led the Akatsuki to defeat Hanzo of the Salamander. You should know about that, right, Madara?" Madara nodded slightly, acknowledging that he was aware. Before his slumber, he had sent Black Zetsu many times to gather intel on Nagato, so he was well aware of the Akatsuki's victory over Hanzo. Furthermore, Madara was not surprised. After all, Nagato was the container Madara had chosen, and despite his weak personality, he possessed the Rinnegan, which could change everything. But what did this have to do with his current resurrection? Black Zetsu noticed the doubt in Madara's eyes and began explaining what had happened since then, from Byakuya's invitation to join the Eye of the Moon plan to the recent Hidden Leaf Village collapse plan. Listening to these events, Madara narrowed his eyes and then turned his gaze toward Obito. Obito's face was already darkened with anger. Every time Byakuya stood out, he often used him as a stepping stone. Therefore, he did not want to bring up these past events voluntarily. Madara sensed something was off. The relationship between Byakuya and Obito seemed somewhat similar to the one he had with Hashirama. Every time he had a plan or idea, Hashirama would always get ahead of him. When he heard Byakuya boast about being the successor of the Senju, determined to stop the Uchiha from destroying the ninja world, the sense of déjà vu peaked. Looking at Obito, who seemed somewhat wronged, and Black Zetsu, who had a smirk on his face, Madara spoke up. So, you're saying you revived me like this because Byakuya stopped you from carrying out the Eye of the Moon plan, and you want me to handle him personally? Before Obito could speak, Black Zetsu shook his head and began explaining the relationship between them and Byakuya. Madara-sama, Byakuya is not our enemy. Not long after you fell into your slumber, we found Byakuya and persuaded him to join the Eye of the Moon plan. We deceived him into believing that collecting the tailed beasts to revive the 10 tails would bring peace to the world through national destruction and deterrence. Over the years, Byakuya has done quite well. He's gathered quite a few tailed beasts for the organization. Hearing this, Madara became even more confused. If Byakuya was an ally and not an enemy, then there would be no need for Obito and Black Zetsu to use the summoning, Impure World reincarnation technique to resurrect him. Wouldn't it be better to use the reincarnation of the Six Paths technique instead? What Madara did not know was that Obito's concerns were exactly that. After a brief pause, Obito spoke awkwardly. Old man, Byakuya has collected the tailed beasts for us, but his power has been growing too fast, and he possesses truly extraordinary strength. If he were to hunt down all the tailed beasts, we might not be able to carry out the Eye of the Moon plan. After all, Byakuya seems to have no interest in the infinite Tsukami. No interest in the infinite Tsukami? Are you scared of him? Madara fell into a brief contemplation. He could understand the first part. Not everyone could grasp the greatness of the infinite Tsukami. The infinite Tsukami was the will of fire, transcended. By using the moon as a projection, Madara's Genjutsu could control all intelligent beings in the ninja world, making them live in a beautiful dream, thus achieving everlasting peace. However, the fear Obito had towards Byakuya was something Madara couldn't quite comprehend. Before his slumber, he had designed Obito's awakening of the Mangekyo Sharingan and left behind many Uchiha legacies and clan artifacts. In theory, Obito should be invincible in the ninja world as long as he has mastered these legacies and the ability to use Kami. How could he fear someone like Byakuya, who was of the same age? But Madara could still sense Obito's fear and sighed lightly in his heart. Obito had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan and had been active in the ninja world for so many years with his status, yet he was still as timid as ever. After taking a deep breath, Madara turned his gaze toward Obito and Black Zetsu, saying coldly, "I'll handle the matter with Byakuya. But let's first discuss the progress on collecting the tailed beasts." Black Zetsu and Obito nodded, then began discussing the situation of the tailed beasts. At present, apart from the 4 tails and 5 tails from Hidden Stones Village and the 8 tails from Hidden Clouds Village, the rest of the tailed beasts and their Jinchuriki were under the watch of the Akatsuki. Most of the tailed beasts were monitored because of Byakuya's involvement. Obito had only successfully captured the 6 tails Jinchuriki, while all other attempts had failed. Madara eyed Obito with suspicion, and his expression gradually became strange. Most of the tasks within the Akatsuki were carried out by Byakuya. Obito had begun to doubt Byakuya's loyalty to the Eye of the Moon plan, which was quite difficult to explain. Even if Madara were to head out and search for Byakuya now, it seemed he wouldn't have many reasons to do so. And compared to Obito, it seems that Byakuya is a better collaborator. Did Madara really misjudge the situation back then, which led me to give up on Byakuya? After understanding the circumstances of most of the Jinchuriki, Madara Uchiha slowly spoke up, saying, "Since most of the tailed beasts are under Byakuya's control, we don't need to rush into dealing with the tailed beasts under his control. In the coming months, we should temporarily focus on the tailed beasts of Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Clouds Village, getting ahead of Byakuya and controlling them first, allowing us to better seize the initiative." After hearing Madara's words, Black Zetsu nodded repeatedly. As the mastermind behind the Eye of the Moon plan, Black Zetsu certainly didn't want internal strife within the organization. If such a conflict broke out, weakening their power, it would delay the time it would take to rescue his mother by decades or even centuries. This is something Black Zetsu could not allow. Compared to Black Zetsu, Obito had a lot of dissatisfaction boiling in his heart. He had used summoning, impure world reincarnation to resurrect Madara Uchiha, hoping that Madara would stand by his side, especially since he and Madara shared a close bond. But after Madara was revived this time, his attitude towards Obito had become quite indifferent. This greatly bothered Obito. After all, the Madara of the past had treated him very well, but the Madara now seemed to regard him like a stranger. Could it be that his actions over the years had disappointed Madara? If he had done things better, perhaps this situation could have been avoided. No, everything he had done was perfect. If Byakuya hadn't interfered recklessly, he would have been able to instigate a much larger Nine-Tails riot. His control over Hidden Mist Village would have lasted much longer, and he wouldn't have had to flee in such a disgraceful manner. It was all Byakuya's fault. If Byakuya could just disappear, everything could be fixed, and he could still carry out the Eye of the Moon plan. What Obito didn't know was that Madara's attitude had changed due to two factors. On the one hand, Madara had always regarded Obito as a mere tool from the very beginning. On the other hand, Madara had learned of the events of the night of the Uchiha massacre. Though Madara claimed not to care about Hidden Leaf Village, in reality, he was quite concerned. Whenever he thought about Obito helping the descendants of Tobirama's student to deal with the Uchiha clan, Madara's teeth would clench in hatred. If it weren't for his current restriction due to Obito and his need to proceed with the Eye of the Moon plan, he would have taught Obito a lesson. For now, Madara would head north toward the Land of Earth, hunting the Four Tails and Five Tails, and perhaps meeting that little brat Onoki again. He hadn't encountered a worthy opponent for a long time. While Madara and the others were heading north to Hidden Stones Village, Denzo was not idle. Even though his perceptions had been altered by Shizue Uchiha, Denzo remained an excellent strategist. After deciding to become the fifth Hokage, he began to take a series of actions. Denzo's greatest opponents on the path to Hokage were Jiraiya and Tsunade. Jiraiya enjoyed the support of Hidden Leaf Village's elite ninja class and was highly recommended by both Tsunade and Mitogeki. If Jiraiya was willing, he could easily become Hokage. However, Jiraiya didn't want to become Hokage, which was good news for Denzo. As for Tsunade, who had run away from home, she too could easily become Hokage. But Tsunade, who had developed hemophobia in her early years, had lost the qualifications to be a ninja. Yet, no one knew whether hemophobia was a real condition or if Tsunade was simply using it as an excuse to avoid village duties. It was unclear whether her fear was genuine or just a means of evading responsibilities. If Tsunade didn't want to return to become Hokage and continued wandering, the position of fifth Hokage would be his without any competition. But there was always the possibility that Tsunade might return. With her massive reputation accumulated over the years in the ninja world and her status as the granddaughter of the first Hokage, Denzo could never compete with her. Unless he could make the first move, creating a time difference by becoming Hokage ahead of her. However, for this to happen, he would need the help of many forces. On one hand, he would have to delay Tsunade's return to the village, and on the other hand, he would need to form an alliance with the daimyo to quickly confirm the Hokage candidate. The first task was not difficult, he just needed to send someone to bribe Tsunade, and she wouldn't be able to resist the temptation of gambling. The real headache, however, was working with the daimyo. Over the years, Denzo had cooperated with the daimyo many times and established various private connections. They had been using each other for their mutual benefit. The daimyo needed Denzo to keep the Hokage and the ninja village's growing power in check. Denzo, on the other hand, needed the daimyo's help to counteract the pressure from the third Hokage and to gain greater benefits for the root organization. But that was before. Now that the third Hokage was dead, many things would change. Denzo had a good relationship with the daimyo, but Tsunade and the daimyo shared a blood relationship. Would the daimyo really abandon supporting Tsunade and instead support Denzo's ascension to Hokage? Denzo had his doubts. There were too many unstable factors in this matter. Although the daimyo might really support him and help him take the position of Hokage, he could also secretly contact other elite ninjas from Hidden Leaf Village to balance his power once he became Hokage. But what if the daimyo of the Land of Fire does not support him? Is there any way to ensure that the daimyo will be obedient enough? Denzo recalled the incident that had occurred in the Land of Wind a few years ago, which had been reported to him by Shizue. It was about the fourth Kazekage, who had become a rogue ninja and attacked the daimyo of the Land of Wind. After that attack, the daimyo, who had originally leaned toward Hidden Leaf Village, became much more cautious and gradually resumed financial support for Hidden Sand Village's military efforts, refraining from interfering too much with Hidden Sand Village's affairs. It was rather laughable, actually. When the fourth Kazekage, Raza, was still the Kazekage, He would often face suppression and even humiliation from the daimyo of the Land of Wind whenever he met him. But after Raza became a rogue ninja, the daimyo of the Land of Wind dared not speak loudly to him. This incident undoubtedly gave Denzo a lot of insight. As someone who sought to become Hokage, Denzo naturally could not openly take action against the daimyo of the Land of Fire. However, he could still use a few schemes. As long as he could make the daimyo of the Land of Fire feel threatened, and solve the problem himself, Denzo was sure to gain the daimyo's favor and support. He could even directly control the daimyo and the entire Land of Fire. Following the example of the hidden village of Hidden Rain Village, Denzo's ultimate goal was to have Hidden Leaf Village annex the Land of Fire in the future. The system of one country, one village, was originally proposed by the first Hokage. At that time, the number of ninjas was limited, so the one country, one village system didn't cause much of a problem. The ninja villages were originally formed as a way for the ninja clans to band together for protection. The purpose was to safeguard the various clans' ninjas. During the time when the first Hokage established the village, Hidden Leaf Village only had 1 or 2,000 ninjas, all members of the ninja clans. Despite this, even though the village had the most powerful military force in the Land of Fire, it still could not control the entire country. The reason was simple. In the Warring States period, being a ninja was a profession that required children to go to the battlefield. Due to their age, it was extremely difficult for ninjas to learn the techniques of killing, and they had no ability to study other knowledge. But with the establishment of ninja villages, the average life expectancy of ninjas increased significantly. To prepare for the upcoming Ninja World War, the second Hokage even established ninja schools, transforming ninjas from simple fighters into well-rounded individuals. It was around this time that the relationship between the ninja villages and the daimyos began to shift. Now, ninja villages had absolute superiority over the daimyos, yet the daimyos still held control over the finances, and their position in name was even higher than that of the ninja villages. Originally, due to long-standing traditions, everyone had accepted the system of one country, one village, but ironically, Hidden Rain Village was the first to break this unspoken rule and led the way to greatness, reaching heights that Hidden Rain Village should not have been able to achieve. Therefore, in order to make Hidden Leaf Village even greater, Denzo knew that he would have to take action against the daimyos. Chapter 388, Rejoining Forces with Orochimaru. Time passed quickly, and before long, half a month had gone by. During this time, the root ninjas dispatched by Denzo arrived in the capital, where the Land of Fire's daimyo resided. After executing a tactic to draw the attention of the guardian ninjas away, the disguised Uchiha root ninjas met with the daimyo of the Land of Fire. The daimyo of the Land of Fire was a frail, middle-aged man who appeared weak and incapable of channeling chakra. However, in reality, he was also a ninja. His skills were not on par with the elite ninjas of Hidden Leaf Village, but he was at the level of a Chunin. Still, this level of strength was nothing compared to the root ninjas. The daimyo soon faced the special treatment of the root ninjas, enduring restless nights filled with nightmares for several consecutive evenings. The daimyo of the Land of Fire had once sought the help of the 12 guardians, but they too were of little assistance. Though they possessed the combat strength of Jonin, their skill in Ganjutsu was nowhere near the level of the Uchiha clan, and many of them were only special Jonin with 3 Tomoe Sharingan. Upon receiving this report, Denzo, hiding in the shadows, revealed a sinister smile. In addition, another important piece of news appeared on Denzo's desk. Tsunade, returning to the village as one of the legendary Sannin, had agreed to become an elder in the village. Denzo was not particularly surprised by this news. He had sent a gambler to entangle Tsunade, not to make her leave the village, but to delay her return. After a preparation period of half a month, he felt confident he could become a candidate for the 5th Hokage. After reviewing all the information, Denzo made his way to the Hokage Tower, ready to take action against both Jiraiya and Tsunade. Inside the Hokage's office, Jiraiya, the acting Hokage, formally received Tsunade and proposed the idea of her becoming the next Hokage. Tsunade did not immediately agree, nor did she reject it outright. She knew that as soon as she spoke, she could become the next Hokage of Hidden Leaf Village, but the responsibility that came with being Hokage was enormous. She did not feel confident enough to take on the role. After some careful thought, Tsunade shook her head to decline. Jiraiya, I'm not ready to become Hokage, and I don't believe I can be a qualified ninja. The position of 5th Hokage should go to you. I'll take charge of Hidden Leaf Village Hospital at most. Upon hearing Tsunade's refusal, the 2 advisors in the shadows exchanged helpless glances. With Tsunade's status and strength, she had long been qualified to become Hokage, not to mention the position of director of Hidden Leaf Village Hospital. It felt like a waste. Thinking about it, the 2 advisors turned their gaze toward Jiraiya. Jiraiya, like Tsunade, had the same problem. They had both already become acting Hokage, and it would only be natural to succeed to the position of 5th Hokage. Why, then, was Jiraiya reluctant to claim the role? At this moment, Denzo, who had been eavesdropping by the door, pushed open the office door. Denzo glanced at Jiraiya and bluntly said, "Since Tsunade doesn't wish to become Hokage, there's no need to force her. Besides, even if she were to become Hokage now, she no longer has the battle power expected of a Hokage." Seeing Tsunade furrow her brow, Denzo continued, "I'll ask you a simpler question. With Tsunade suffering from hemophobia, can you still defeat the elite Jonin of the ninja world?" At this, the faces of the Hidden Leaf Village high-ranking officials around them changed. Tsunade's hemophobia was well known. She had given up fighting as a ninja, which was why she had left Hidden Leaf Village. This was also the reason why her departure was not considered an act of defection. Tsunade's grandfather and great-uncle were the first and second Hokage, and as long as Tsunade did not openly oppose Hidden Leaf Village, her leaving the village was considered a voluntary departure, not defection. After being questioned by Denzo, Tsunade fell into deep thought. Though Denzo's words were harsh, they were true. Since contracting hemophobia, her combat abilities had significantly decreased. She could only manage about 50% of her original strength. Against ordinary Jonin, she could still rely on her physical strength and chakra reserves to overwhelm them. However, when facing an opponent of similar strength, she had little to no chance of victory. Seeing that his words had made an impact, Denzo continued. Furthermore, Tsunade has been away from the village for so long. If she returns now, can she really take over the mess left by Hiruzen? At these words, Jiraiya fell silent for a few seconds. Denzo was right. Tsunade had been away for so long, how well did she even know the current state of the village? If she didn't understand the situation of the village, how could she possibly change its dire circumstances? Tsunade and Jiraiya exchanged glances with each other before realizing Denzo's intentions. Just after the third Hokage's funeral, Denzo had expressed his desire to become Hokage, but he lacked the proper nominations, meaning he couldn't even run for the position. Everyone had thought that Denzo had given up on becoming Hokage, resigning himself to being the leader of the root organization. But now, Denzo was taking action against Tsunade and Jiraiya, trying to snatch the position of Hokage. If Denzo wanted to run for Hokage, no one had any objections. However, they were questioning his age. He hadn't fought any equal opponents for decades. Did he truly have the strength to become Hokage? At that moment, Homura Mikado, understanding Denzo's intentions, spoke up. "Denzo, don't tell me you intend to compete for the position of 5th Hokage? Are you sure you want to become an opponent to both Tsunade and Jiraiya?" Denzo nodded confidently. In the current situation, with internal and external troubles, it is necessary for a calm and mature ninja to become Hokage. Looking at the entire Hidden Leaf Village, aside from you two, only I am qualified. Facing Denzo's confident statement, Homura Mikado and Koharu Utatane frowned slightly, while Jiraiya and Tsunade's expressions also changed. Although they had differing ideologies, none of them wanted Denzo to become Hokage. Homura Mikado and Koharu Utatane knew Denzo all too well. If Denzo became Hokage, the Hokage building would turn into his personal dictatorial chamber, and the two advisors would lose most of their power. Jiraiya and Tsunade, on the other hand, believed that Denzo was too cold and ruthless, making him unsuitable for the will of fire. After careful consideration, Koharu Utatane spoke up. "Denzo, we don't oppose your candidacy for Hokage, but to become Hokage, you must receive a nomination. To become Hokage, one had to be nominated by the higher-ups of Hidden Leaf Village. In theory, Denzo could nominate himself, but even with this, he would need to pass the election in the Jonin Assembly, and Denzo probably wouldn't do it that way. Furthermore, aside from Denzo himself, almost no one would nominate him for the position." After hearing this, Denzo suddenly spoke up. "Of course I have been nominated, and it was the daimyo of the Land of Fire himself who fought for it." His words stunned the ninjas in the room. They had almost forgotten that the daimyo of the Land of Fire had such power. If the daimyo truly supported Denzo for the position of Hokage, his chances of becoming Hokage were indeed quite high. But why would the daimyo support Denzo instead of Tsunade? Did Denzo use some form of coercion against the daimyo? Homura Mikado shook his head and said, "That's impossible. The daimyo would never suggest you as Hokage." Denzo saw through Homura Mikado's thoughts and replied indifferently. "Why wouldn't the daimyo nominate me? Homura, you're still stuck with old ideas. I've been guarding the village all these years without slackening." He paused for a moment and turned to Jiraiya and Tsunade. "As acting Hokage, it's time to hold the Hokage election. I want to take over the mess left by Hiruzen as soon as possible and correct the mistakes he made. As for whether I can become Hokage, let the Jonin of the village decide." With that, Denzo confidently left the Hokage office, leaving the others to exchange glances. Watching Denzo leave, the two advisors fell into deep thought. Denzo still wanted to become Hokage, but no matter when, he would never be able to. He couldn't become Hokage before, and he still couldn't now. After thinking this over, the two advisors turned to Tsunade and Jiraiya and said, "Denzo is going to make trouble again. I'll try to persuade him to abandon the competition, but you two need to work hard as well." They paused before turning to Tsunade and saying, "Tsunade, do you really have hemophobia? If it's true." The two didn't dare continue their words. Tsunade, with her status, experience, and medical ninja profession, was loved by the ninjas of Hidden Leaf Village. But these were merely advantages for becoming Hokage, not the deciding factors. The only absolute factor in becoming Hokage was being the strongest ninja in Hidden Leaf Village. Otherwise, if an assassination attempt occurred, the village would face a huge blow. Tsunade stayed silent for a few seconds before saying, "I do have hemophobia. When I see blood, my strength drops significantly. But after all these years, I've more or less gotten used to the symptoms." Tsunade's bluntness left the two advisors unsure of what to say next. If Tsunade truly had hemophobia and couldn't display the strength of a Sannin, she would indeed not be suitable for the 5th Hokage position. At best, she could serve as the head of Hidden Leaf Village Hospital. The advisors then looked to Jiraiya for answers. After all, it was his idea to invite Tsunade back to become Hokage, so it was up to him to resolve the situation. Jiraiya looked at Tsunade, then said, "I'll help Tsunade overcome her hemophobia. If we face an opponent we can't defeat, I'll handle it. I'll take care of these troubles for Tsunade." Tsunade rolled her eyes, walked up to Jiraiya, and said, "Who told you to make decisions without consulting me? I haven't even said I want to run for Hokage. Letting Denzo become Hokage isn't necessarily a bad thing." After a pause, Tsunade continued, "But I will still run for Hokage, not to become Hokage, but to protect Hidden Leaf Village, the Hidden Leaf Village left by Grandpa and Great-Uncle." Upon hearing Tsunade's decision, the two advisors and Jiraiya sighed in relief. If Tsunade had refused to run for the 5th Hokage, they would have had no suitable candidate. As for letting Denzo become Hokage, they didn't want to take such a huge risk. Just then, as Denzo was leaving the Hokage building, he suddenly stopped and looked back at the Hokage office with a meaningful expression. He knew that Jiraiya, Tsunade, and the two advisors would oppose him becoming Hokage. Since that was the case, he couldn't be blamed for using certain methods. Everyone's ultimate goal was to protect Hidden Leaf Village, and in order to clear the way for Hidden Leaf Village's future, it was only right for him to eliminate the obstacles in his path. Several days passed, and Denzo secretly contacted Orochimaru. The last time, they had teamed up for the Hidden Leaf Village destruction plan, eliminating the elderly and immortal 3rd Hokage. This created a vacuum in Hidden Leaf Village's highest power, giving Denzo the opportunity to run for Hokage. Denzo was planning to take action against Tsunade and Jiraiya next. If the Jonin Assembly was truly convened and there was a vote for Hokage, he knew it would be impossible to defeat Tsunade and Jiraiya. Unlike his own quiet and unremarkable presence, Tsunade and Jiraiya had both ruled over entire battlefields. In addition to commanding troops in war, they had earned the loyalty of many Hidden Leaf Village ninjas, gaining immense fame and prestige. As early as a decade ago, they were both popular candidates for the position of Hokage. On the other hand, Denzo Shimura's presence, aside from among a few Jonin and some Chunin, was barely noticed. His influence was even less significant than that of the Jonin class. Therefore, he planned to spread the news about Tsunade's hemophobia and, at the same time, team up with Orochimaru to ensure that Tsunade and Jiraiya would not be able to participate in the Hokage election. As long as Tsunade and Jiraiya did not run, he could easily become Hokage. Within half a day, Denzo contacted Orochimaru. At the time, Orochimaru was in the Forest of Death, observing Kabuto, who was meeting with him for the 5th time. After finding Orochimaru, Denzo, accompanied by his trusted subordinates, made their way to him. He instructed Shizui and the others to wait off to the side while he approached Orochimaru, and together they observed Kabuto in the distance. Denzo was no stranger to Kabuto. Kabuto was one of the elite operatives from the Root organization, whom Denzo had personally handpicked. Kabuto was also the adopted son of his former subordinate, Nano Yakushi. Years ago, Denzo had orchestrated a situation where the two would end up turning on each other, breaking their bond and leaving one of them completely under Denzo's control. However, during the execution of this plan, an unexpected event occurred. Hidden Stone's village's Onoki had fought a mysterious ninja, and the battle unintentionally affected both Kabuto and Nano. Nano had died in the aftermath of the fight, while Kabuto returned to the Root organization with the news. Denzo had been surprised at the time, But once he confirmed through other channels that Nano had indeed died, he sent Kabuto to the Ninja Academy. In recent years, Denzo had not paid much attention to Kabuto, so he was surprised to find that Kabuto had attracted the attention of Orochimaru. Returning his thoughts to the present, Denzo turned to Orochimaru and said, "Orochimaru, are you interested in Kabuto? If you like him, I can give him to you." Orochimaru did not respond directly to Denzo. Instead, he asked, "Or perhaps you would like to tell me what you're here for? I remember our cooperation just ended not long ago. What do you want this time?" Denzo didn't waste time with pleasantries and immediately said, "In 1 week, the village will hold the Hokage election. I need you to delete Tsunade and Jiraiya, and help me become Hokage." "Help you become Hokage?" Orochimaru narrowed his eyes slightly, sensing something from Denzo, and then said, "Jiraiya and Tsunade are my friends. I won't easily take action against them." Chapter 389, The Meeting of the Three Legendary Sannin. Denzo let out a cold laugh and said, "You already made a move against Hiruzen Sarutobi. Do you really care about this? You're just trying to squeeze more benefits out of me." Orochimaru didn't deny it. He nodded slightly. "You're not wrong. But what can you offer me now? I've already obtained what I wanted." Denzo smirked for a second. "I can revoke the bounty on your head, even allow you to return to Hidden Leaf Village and serve as the Hokage's second-in-command. You think I care about the Hokage position?" Orochimaru stared at Denzo and continued. "If I cared about becoming Hokage, I wouldn't have left Hidden Leaf Village in the first place. As for lifting the bounty, that's even more ridiculous. Who would actually dare try to capture me for a reward?" Denzo fell silent for a few seconds, staring intently at Orochimaru. At the moment, he indeed had nothing compelling to offer that could persuade Orochimaru to cooperate. Orochimaru, who had already established his own independent shinobi village, lacked neither funding nor subordinates. He could freely purchase experimental materials from the black market, practically without any limitations. Was there really no way to convince Orochimaru? Just then, a bold thought flashed through Denzo's mind. Should he take advantage of their solitude and strike now? If he could use Sharingan Genjutsu to control Orochimaru, he would gain a powerful asset. But such a move came with considerable risk. Orochimaru wasn't like Shizue Uchiha, he was cunning and constantly on guard. If the attack failed, it would completely sever their fragile alliance. Though Denzo wasn't worried about Orochimaru exposing their dealings, if Orochimaru deliberately caused trouble for him, it would be difficult to handle. After all, Orochimaru had mastered the Impure World Reincarnation technique and held the first and second Hokage under his control. Denzo himself had thought about having the first and second Hokage return in that form to protect Hidden Leaf Village, but he knew that if he really did that, Hashirama-sama and Obirama-sensei would surely oppose him with all their might. Reviving past Hokage would completely ruin any chance he had of becoming Hokage himself. As Denzo's thoughts spiraled, Orochimaru was also weighing his options, wondering whether to continue cooperating with Denzo or simply eliminate him here and now. Their thoughts mirrored each other, both were considering ending their old alliance right here. Just as Orochimaru hesitated, a voice whispered into his ear. After hearing its message, Orochimaru smiled and said to Denzo, "Denzo, I'll agree to cooperate with you, but I have a few conditions." Seeing Orochimaru willing to cooperate, Denzo let out a sigh of relief and asked, "Name your conditions. As long as they're not too outrageous, I can accept them." As he spoke, Denzo was already setting boundaries in his mind. He was willing to accept Orochimaru's demands, but he would never allow Orochimaru to meddle in the internal affairs of Hidden Leaf Village. Ever since the third Hokage's death, Denzo had already considered the village his own. Orochimaru could read Denzo's intentions and smiled. "Don't worry. I won't make things too hard for you. I only want a few people. My Hidden Sound Village is still short on manpower." "You? Short on people? Your sound shinobi did quite well during the Chunin exams." "They did, but they're still far from what I consider ideal subordinates." Orochimaru paused, then added, "What I want are true geniuses." Denzo grew impatient. "Cut the crap and just tell me who you want." Orochimaru looked toward Kabuto Yakushi, not far away, then said, "Kabuto Yakushi is a talented individual. Once we start working together, he'll be under my command." Denzo nodded in agreement. Kabuto was an elite shinobi of root and had the potential to become a jonin in the future, but that was the extent of it. At most, he'd make a decent subordinate. Exchanging Kabuto for Orochimaru's cooperation was a trade well worth it. After securing Kabuto's allegiance, Orochimaru continued. "Besides Kabuto, I want another shinobi, Sasuke Uchiha." "You want Sasuke Uchiha too?" Denzo frowned, visibly troubled. Sasuke wasn't just any shinobi, he was Itachi's younger brother. One of the main reasons Itachi hadn't leaked Hidden Leaf Village's secrets over the years was precisely because of Sasuke's existence. After a moment of silence, Denzo said, "Orochimaru, I can't hand over Sasuke to you. He's the last Uchiha in the village. The rest of the leadership keeps a close eye on his every move. If you really want Sasuke Uchiha, I can at least provide you with intelligence." After a pause, he continued. "Even so, I must warn you, although Sasuke is a Hidden Leaf Village shinobi, his brother is Itachi Uchiha. If you take Sasuke, Itachi will definitely come after you." Orochimaru's lips curled into a smile. "Denzo, the very reason I want Sasuke is because of his brother, Itachi Uchiha. You still remember our old wood-style project, don't you? Itachi would be the perfect test subject. That project was all fake. You're just after his Mangekyo Sharingan." Denzo bluntly exposed Orochimaru's true motive, then said, "But it's actually better if you take him. The village doesn't need that kind of threat around. Risk often brings opportunity, Denzo. Isn't that why you're competing for the Hokage seat? If you wanted a quiet life, you wouldn't be a shinobi." Denzo no longer wanted to banter. He said seriously, "Enough talk. Let's discuss the terms of cooperation properly." Orochimaru nodded as well. He was also curious about Denzo's plan. A few minutes later, Denzo revealed his plan. He wanted Orochimaru to attack Tsunade and expose her hemophobia to the world, proving she was unfit to protect the village as Hokage. Then, Denzo would appear mid-battle and swiftly defeat Orochimaru, avenging the fallen third Hokage and saving the village. After hearing the plan, Orochimaru sighed as if he was hearing some shitty plot of hero saving the damsel in distress, but he ultimately agreed. After discussing the details, they were ready to part ways. Before leaving, Denzo used Roots communication methods to summon Kabuto. He glanced at Kabuto and said, "Kabuto, from now on, you are Orochimaru's shinobi. But I hope you won't forget who you once were. You'll always be a shinobi of Hidden Leaf Village." Kabuto put on a worried, uneasy expression, hesitating between Denzo and Orochimaru. Denzo vanished in a flash using the teleportation jutsu. Left behind, Kabuto turned with a look of quiet disappointment and said to Orochimaru, "Orochimaru-sama. Please take care of me." Orochimaru didn't waste words and gestured for Kabuto to follow him as they headed into the dense forest. However, even Orochimaru failed to notice, when he turned away, the confusion and hesitation in Kabuto's eyes had vanished, replaced by something far more calculating. Ever since saving the orphanage director, Kabuto no longer had any reason to stay in Hidden Leaf Village. All these years spent undercover in Hidden Leaf Village en route were entirely to live up to Lord Byakuya's expectations, and now, the latest mission Byakuya had given him was to infiltrate Orochimaru's side. He had long heard of Orochimaru's name. This was a shinobi who had maintained a long-standing cooperation with Denzo, a venomous snake lurking in the shadows. But even so, Kabuto Yakushi was confident he could complete this mission and stay hidden by Orochimaru's side. The only regret was that he wouldn't get to witness Denzo's downfall with his own eyes. A few days after returning to Hidden Leaf Village, Tsunade had already adapted to her role as the head of Hidden Leaf Village's hospital. Though she still felt uneasy at the sight of blood, she was able to guide the medical ninja of the village through her experience, while also beginning to reform the existing medical structure. 20 years ago, she had once proposed a major reform during a high-level council meeting. It was simple: every shinobi squad should be assigned a medical ninja. The medical ninja didn't have to be exceptionally skilled, but at the very least, they needed a fundamental understanding of medical techniques. This reform greatly reduced the casualty rate among shinobi squads and earned Tsunade immense praise and recognition. But that was 2 decades ago, and combat methods in the shinobi world had evolved since then. Medical ninja had to adapt to the new era as well. She'd heard that in Hidden Rain Village, there was already a technique that sealed medical ninjutsu into scrolls. With some pre-prepared medicines, almost every shinobi there had the ability to heal themselves. Coupled with chakra-powered weapons, even the average Hidden Rain Village ninja now possessed formidable strength. After finishing a long day of work, Tsunade headed toward a nearby izakaya, planning to unwind with a few drinks. Originally, she'd hoped to relieve her stress with a little gambling, but Hidden Leaf Village had no casinos at all, much to her frustration. Once she became Hokage, she was absolutely going to open a casino right in the center of Hidden Leaf Village. Halfway there, though, something began to feel off. Wasn't this around the time when Shizune would usually find her and try to talk her out of going to a casino or a bar? Urge her to focus on repaying her debts? Could it be that Shizune had gone to visit Dan? Even if so, she should have told her. That thought sobered Tsunade up instantly. Shizune's sudden disappearance felt strange, very strange. Still, Shizune had Jonin level skills. It didn't make sense for her to be attacked within the village. Just as Tsunade was lost in thought, a civilian suddenly appeared beside her. Her sharp instincts kicked in, and she used the teleportation jutsu to instantly subdue the person. Upon inspecting the civilian, Tsunade's expression darkened. The person had been under a Ganjutsu and had approached her under manipulation. Their real purpose was still unclear. After canceling the Ganjutsu, Tsunade questioned the civilian. He looked confused, but then handed her a letter. The moment she saw the envelope, her heart sank. She quickly scanned the letter, and her face turned ashen. With a single punch charged with monstrous strength, she struck the wall beside her, leaving behind a deep crack. The contents of the letter were simple. It revealed that Shizune hadn't disappeared by accident, she'd been kidnapped. But the target wasn't Shizune herself. The enemy's real goal was to meet Tsunade. A meeting place was specified. She was also warned not to bring anyone with her. This was obviously a trap, and Tsunade knew it well. What she didn't know was who the attacker was, or what kind of confidence they had to dare request a meeting with her. Had the new generation forgotten the name of the legendary Sannin? So, should she go alone, or tell Jiraiya first? After a brief moment of consideration, Tsunade decided to take the initiative and face the mysterious enemy who had taken Shizune. Still, she made sure to notify the other high-ranking members of Hidden Leaf Village before leaving. Following the directions in the letter, Tsunade quickly arrived at a secluded alley. After several turns, she finally saw the shinobi who had taken Shizune. Her expression froze, and her gaze sharpened instantly. The one who had kidnapped Shizune was none other than Orochimaru, her former comrade and teammate. Seeing her arrive, Orochimaru didn't make things difficult for Shizune. He cast a Ganjutsu on her, making her fall into a deep sleep, then turned to Tsunade and said, "Long time no see, Miss Princess Tsunade." Orochimaru. Tsunade almost growled his name through clenched teeth. "Why did you kill the old man? You knew he doted on you the most." Unfazed, Orochimaru replied, "I simply helped him fulfill his wish, to die on the battlefield. When Minato died and the old man chose to serve as Hokage again, his soul had already died. And so, his death now is just the death of the flesh. His will of fire died long ago." Orochimaru paused before smirking. "Don't you find it laughable, talking about the will of fire coming from your mouth?" Tsunade glared into Orochimaru's eyes and said coldly, "No matter what your reasons are, you killed our teacher. I've never denied that." He paused, then added, "But if performing human experiments means someone loses their will of fire, then the second Hokage should have lost his a long time ago." With a wave of his hand, Orochimaru continued, "I didn't come here to waste time chatting. I have something else I want to ask of you. If you agree, I'll give you something in return, something you'll be satisfied with." "What do you want me to do?" Tsunade asked, puzzled. Orochimaru got straight to the point. "Do you remember the wood-style project the old man shut down back then? I want to borrow your medical expertise to restart it, to reduce the risks of integrating Hashirama cells. Restart the wood-style project. And why the hell would I agree to that?" Tsunade was disgusted by the idea. For one, wood-style experiments required the use of Hashirama cells, the ones harvested from her grandfather's remains. And besides, the wood-style experiments were brutal. Countless shinobi had died in those tests. As if he had anticipated her reaction, Orochimaru calmly said, "Don't rush to reject me. Let's talk about what you really care about. If you help me with this, I'll use the impure world reincarnation to bring back Nawaki and Dan." Chapter 390, Individual Battles Bring Back Nawaki and Dan? When she heard those words, Tsunade looked up at Orochimaru. A flicker of confusion passed through her eyes as memories of Nawaki and Kato Dan began surfacing in her mind. Nawaki was her younger brother and Orochimaru's first student. As the grandson of the first Hokage, Nawaki had inherited his grandfather's talent and his warm, sunny personality. If he had been allowed to grow up normally, he would have easily earned the rank of elite Jonin. But during the Second Great Ninja War, Nawaki, on his very first mission outside the village, had triggered a trap set with explosive tags. He was engulfed in flames instantly, even Orochimaru didn't have time to save him. As for Dan Kato, he had been an outstanding Jonin of the village and Tsunade's former lover. On the day he died from severe injuries inflicted by the enemy, Tsunade developed her hemophobia. If Orochimaru truly had the ability to bring Nawaki and Dan back to life, Tsunade didn't dare think any further. She was afraid that she might actually agree to Orochimaru's proposal. Forcing the thought from her mind, she steadied herself and said sternly, "The dead are already gone. I won't allow you to disturb their rest." Orochimaru blinked in brief surprise, then tilted his head and said with some confusion, "I thought you might agree to work with me. I miss Nawaki too, after all. But it seems his sister isn't willing to let him return." Tsunoda's expression darkened. She clenched her fists, cracking her knuckles, then said coldly. Don't you dare mention Nawaki or Dan again. I'm not accepting your offer. And if it's a fight after, I won't turn you down. She hoped to scare Orochimaru off and avoid a direct confrontation. Since developing her hemophobia, her strength had significantly declined. Though she was still stronger than most shinobi, Orochimaru was clearly among the top tier. Even in her prime, she wouldn't necessarily have beaten him. But Orochimaru wasn't the least bit fazed by the threat. He chuckled and said, maybe I would have been cautious in the past. But now that you've got hemophobia, can you still fight like you used to? Why don't you just come with me quietly and help me research the first Hokage's cells? With those words, Orochimaru struck first. Hidden shadow snake hands shot from his sleeve, lashing toward Tsunoda's face at high speed. Tsunoda dodged cleanly, vanishing from sight, only to reappear behind him a moment later and smash a punch straight into his back. Boom. Orochimaru was hit squarely by a monstrous blow. The impact was like a freight train at full speed. The instant it connected, Orochimaru's body collapsed into a puddle of boneless flesh, slumping to the ground in a mess of blood and tissue. Looking down at the gore on the ground, Tsunoda felt her stomach churn with revulsion. The hemophobia she'd been keeping under control began to awaken. Her eyes spun, her vision tilted, and her body wobbled, unable to keep its balance. Seeing this, Orochimaru emerged from the shadows and released two small snakes toward her. He could tell something was off with Tsunoda, as she might be succumbing to her phobia. But who was to say she hadn't been faking all these years? The snakes bared their fangs and sank them into her, leaving 4 bloody punctures and injecting their venom. Orochimaru glowered. He still couldn't be sure whether Tsunoda had been faking her condition. The venom on these snakes was potent, but it shouldn't pose a serious threat to her. 10 seconds passed, then 20. Tsunoda's face visibly darkened. Orochimaru grew more suspicious. Could Tsunoda really have hemophobia? Could a medical ninja truly be afraid of blood? Shoving those thoughts aside, Orochimaru slowly stepped toward her. He didn't yet know what to do with her. He had attacked Tsunoda for her medical expertise, he wanted to speed up his research into Hashirama's cells. But in truth, he didn't need her help at all. This attack on Tsunoda was only to fulfill a part of his deal with Denzo. And that was the real issue. He was already close to subduing Tsunoda, yet Denzo still hadn't shown up. Was he really supposed to push her to the brink before Denzo made his move? To buy more time, Orochimaru said. Tsunoda. It seems the rumors were true. You really are terrified of blood. I'll give you one last chance, either cooperate with me, or keep resisting and die here. You still have a future ahead of you. Who knows, you might become the 5th Hokage of the village. Tsunoda slowly recovered from her hemophobia, and stared at Orochimaru. There's nothing to discuss between me and someone like you, she said coldly. If you want to fight, I'll give you one any time. While Orochimaru was fighting Tsunoda, Denzo and his loyal subordinates were on their way to the rendezvous point. But halfway there, he encountered Jiraiya, who was rushing over to aid Tsunoda. Denzo's face twisted, and he immediately ordered Shizue to attack Jiraiya. If Jiraiya made it to the battlefield, the 3 Sannin would undoubtedly clash again. The fight might not lead to any deaths, but it would completely ruin Denzo's scheme to win public favor. Right now, the top priority was to stop Jiraiya, so Denzo could reach Orochimaru and deal with Tsunoda himself. After splitting the team, Denzo quickened his pace, soon turning into a black blur that vanished into the shadows of the forest. Meanwhile, on the other side, the masked Shizue intercepted Jiraiya. Jiraiya noticed the figure blocking his path. The man wore an animal mask and was completely cloaked in black, making it impossible to identify him with the naked eye. Remembering Shizune's earlier distress call, Jiraiya's expression darkened. Ever since the 3rd Hokage passed away, the ninja world had become infested with small-time troublemakers. Not only had some begun encroaching upon Hidden Lee Village's territory, but now they were bold enough to attack one of the legendary Sannin, Tsunoda. Tsunoda was no longer who she used to be. Since developing hemophobia, her strength had taken a drastic plunge. If he didn't step in, something might really happen to her. But more than anything, Jiraiya wanted to find out who the attacker was. With that thought, he formed hand seals and unleashed the wild lion's main technique. His soft hair hardened under the influence of chakra, lashing toward Shizue like a spear. Shizue remained expressionless as he activated his own jutsu, entering a combat stance. He had always wanted to test himself against one of the famed Sannin, and now he finally had his chance. When Jiraiya saw his initial attack fail, he frowned. This mysterious shinobi was strong enough to stand toe-to-toe with him. But what was his goal? Gathering chakra in his throat, Jiraiya formed seals and shouted. Fire style, great fireball. Jiraiya was a master of fire style, wielding some of its most powerful techniques. Faced with that level of power, even Shizue had no choice but to avoid it temporarily. After dodging the flames, Shizue drew a short sword from under his cloak and launched a counterattack. His movements were incredibly fast, leaving after images in the air, classic teleportation jutsu. At that speed, it looked almost like teleportation. Jiraiya used his iron-hard hair to block Shizue's blade, but he was always half a step behind. He could only defend, unable to land a meaningful strike. But as the battle dragged on, Jiraiya began to sense something off. Though the masked ninja said nothing, his fighting style was unmistakably similar to that of the Uchiha clan. That raised suspicions in Jiraiya's mind. But there was only one Uchiha left in the village now. Sasuke had stood out during the Chunin exams, but he couldn't possibly be the one holding his own in a battle like this. No, this couldn't be Sasuke. That's when another name popped into Jiraiya's head. The S-rank rogue ninja who had annihilated the Uchiha clan and left Sasuke an orphan, Itachi Uchiha. If this was Itachi, then it would make sense why the fight was so evenly matched. His guard rising, Jiraiya quickly summoned Gamabunta, along with the elder toads Fukasaku and Shima. Gamabunta would help buy time while Fukasaku and Shima gathered nature energy for him to enter Sage mode. Shizue glanced between Jiraiya and the incoming Gamabunta, then charged forward to engage the massive toad. Gamabunta was a formidable fighter, at least at the level of an elite Jonin. Thanks to his massive body and agile combat skills, he could even go head-to-head with a tailed beast for a short period of time. This was part of Jiraiya's strength as one of the Sannin. The power of the Sannin wasn't just in their individual abilities, but also in their contracts with the three great summoning realms. On the surface, Hidden Leaf Village seemed to have only the Night-Tail's Jinchuriki capable of changing the tide of war, but in truth, each of the Sannin had that power. Even so, Gamabunta wasn't quite enough to keep up with Shizue. Shizue's arsenal included Wood Style, Sharingan Genjutsu, and Susanoo, all of which could easily suppress Gamabunta. However, he couldn't risk revealing the Wood Style or Susanoo just yet, so he opted to use Genjutsu through his Sharingan. His eyes glowed with an eerie red light, and the illusion technique hit Gamabunta. Gamabunta's chakra reserves were immense, so controlling him wasn't easy. Shizue managed to trap him in the illusion, but manipulating him in the short term was another matter entirely. Jiraiya noticed this and urged Fukasaku and Shima to hurry up and gather the natural energy. Fukasaku gave him a sideways glance and grumbled. "Quit rushing us, Jiraiya boy. Gathering nature energy takes time. We'll let you know when it's ready. But in the meantime, you wanna explain what the hell is going on?" Shima also looked over, clearly curious about Jiraiya's motives. Jiraiya let out a soft sigh. "I suspect Orochimaru has returned, with Itachi Uchiha. If we don't deal with him soon, Tsunade could be in real danger." As he spoke, Fukasaku and Shima finished gathering enough energy, allowing Jiraiya to enter Sage mode. Pigment marks spread across his face, and a distinct change took place in his eyes. Sage mode, the proper way to wield nature energy. By blending chakra with nature energy in a 1-to-1 ratio, the user could unleash destructive Sage techniques, overwhelming their opponent with sheer power. Once in Sage mode, Jiraiya's speed, strength, and chakra all saw a dramatic increase. Shizue also noticed the change in Jiraiya and immediately grew more alert. Jiraiya's current state was strange, undeniably powerful. This had to be the so-called Sage mode. Shizue wasn't unfamiliar with Sage mode. He remembered that the Akatsuki base had long been researching the Cursed Seal technique. When pushed to its limits, the Cursed Seal could produce effects similar to Sage mode. The first Hokage, who once ended the Warring States period, had also mastered Sage mode. However, Jiraiya clearly couldn't be compared to the first Hokage. Even with Sage mode, at best he could suppress Shizue temporarily, but defeating him outright would be difficult. Jiraiya's goal was clear: use Sage mode to pressure Shizue and find an opening to support Tsunade. Sage Art, Toad Oil Flame Bullet. Standing beside Gamabunta, Jiraiya finished weaving hand seals. Coordinating with Gamabunta's Toad Oil, they completed this devastating technique. In an instant, flames lit up the sky, turning the surrounding darkness into blazing daylight. The scorching heat twisted the air and devoured oxygen and life alike, reducing everything around them to scorched earth. Shizue activated Susanoo to forcibly block the attack. Just as the jutsu ended, he dismissed Susanoo, revealing a clearly weakened state, but still standing in Jiraiya's path. "I can't let you pass. Something important is happening over there." Breathing heavily, Shizue stood in front of Jiraiya. His mask was cracked and looked like it could shatter at any moment. The next second, the mask indeed broke apart, revealing an exceptionally delicate and handsome face. Jiraiya found the face familiar, but couldn't place it, until Shizue used the teleportation jutsu again. That's when the realization hit him. The ninja blocking his path was none other than Shizue Uchiha, who had been missing for years. Why had he disappeared all those years ago? And why was he here now, standing in his way? These questions swirled in Jiraiya's mind. And then he noticed something strange. There was some sort of Genjutsu cast over Shizue, one that seemed to be manipulating his actions. So a new question arose: who cast this illusion on Shizue, and for what purpose? But thinking alone wouldn't yield the answer. If Jiraiya wanted to find out the truth, he'd have to defeat Shizue first. Chapter 391, Heartbreaking Shizue in Sage Mode. Jiraiya's strength was terrifying. In the original timeline, even when facing the 6 paths of pain, who were at a Super Kage level, he managed to hold his own for quite a while and almost succeeded in turning the tables. At the Kage level, Jiraiya had few true rivals. Even so, defeating Shizue Uchiha wouldn't be an easy task. Shizue, known as Shizue of the Body Flicker, was extraordinarily fast. If he truly wanted to escape, very few people in the current shinobi world could catch up to him. Realizing this, Jiraiya began contemplating how to take Shizue down. Unless something unexpected happened, he would likely only get one shot at subduing Shizue. If Shizue became wary, capturing him again would be extremely difficult. At that moment, nearby Hidden Leaf Village shinobi also noticed the disturbance and rushed over. With the recent death of the 3rd Hokage, any signs of trouble in Hidden Leaf Village would immediately raise alarm. The village was still in a weakened state, and its ninja feared that enemy forces might try to take advantage of the situation. Seeing Jiraiya at the scene, both Kakashi and Might Guy, who had rushed over, breathed a sigh of relief. To them, Jiraiya was like an immovable pillar. As long as he was around, nothing too chaotic would happen. As they arrived at Jiraiya's side, they looked toward Shizue in the distance. Guy thought the person looked familiar, like he had seen him somewhere before. Kakashi, on the other hand, immediately recognized him and said in shock, "Isn't that Shizue Uchiha, who's been missing for years? Why is he attacking Jiraiya-sama?" Jiraiya shook his head and replied, "I don't know why he attacked me either. But there's another chakra within him. It seems like he's being controlled by someone's Genjutsu. Someone used Genjutsu to control Shizue." Kakashi and Guy exchanged incredulous looks, unsure if they had heard correctly. The Uchiha clan, with their Sharingan bloodline, were naturally gifted at Genjutsu. Even without specializing in it, the Sharingan granted them immense resistance to illusionary techniques. And Shizue had once been the strongest Uchiha. Not only had he mastered the teleportation jutsu to an extraordinary level, his skill in Genjutsu was terrifying, so much so that enemy Jonin would retreat upon merely sensing his chakra. During the war with Hidden Cloud's village, he and Byakuya had even defeated the Two-Tails Jinchuriki. Though his power might not have matched the 5 Kage completely, it wasn't far off. For someone like that to be controlled by Genjutsu? It was nearly unthinkable. Noticing the expressions on their faces, Jiraiya understood what they were thinking. Truthfully, he also found it hard to believe. But there were indeed 2 distinct chakra signatures within Shizue. After a moment of silence, Jiraiya said to Kakashi and Guy, "Tsunade was attacked. You two should help me deal with Shizue. Let's end this quickly." Kakashi and Might Guy both nodded and moved to encircle Shizue from different directions. Seeing Kakashi and Guy enter the scene, Shizue was inwardly startled. This wasn't what he had expected. Why were Kakashi and Might Guy the ones to respond? Kakashi's reputation spoke for itself, a veteran elite Jonin and a pillar of the younger generation. Guy might not seem wise, but his strength was terrifying. Even Byakuya had ranked him among the top 3 strongest ninjas in Hidden Leaf Village today. Being surrounded by these 3, even if he gave it his all, Shizue faced the risk of failure. If he truly failed this mission, it would mean betraying Byakuya-sama's trust, and losing the chance to help the Uchiha rise again. He had to give it everything he had. The next performance was about to begin. As soon as he entered the fight, Kakashi removed his forehead protector, revealing his Ire 3 Tomoe Sharingan, and immediately charged at Shizue with a flash of lightning in hand. Might Guy shouted loudly and opened 8 gates released formation. The first inner gate, the gate of opening, open. 8 gates released formation. The second inner gate, the gate of healing, open. 8 gates released formation. The third inner gate, the gate of life, open. 8 gates released formation. The fourth inner gate, the gate of pain, open. 8 gates released formation. The fifth inner gate, the gate of limit, open. 8 gates released formation. The sixth inner gate, the gate of view, open, his body glowing green. Last to act was Jiraiya, who formed a massive Rasengan in his hand. All 3 launched simultaneous attacks on Shizue, putting him under immense pressure. Faced with the coordinated assault, Shizue quickly fell into a disadvantage. In less than 30 seconds, he was subdued. Bound by sealing techniques, he could no longer fight back. Jiraiya approached and formed a hand seal, murmuring, "Ganjutsu release." After dispelling the chakra that had taken root in Shijue's body, Shizue frowned briefly. Then his eyes became dazed and confused. He muttered, "Wasn't I being controlled? How did I end up here?" Soon, he noticed Jiraiya-sama standing nearby. His expression turned defensive as he said, "Jiraiya-sama, Kakashi-senpai, and Might Guy-senpai? Why are you all here?" Jiraiya didn't answer right away. He looked at Kakashi and Guy, and the three exchanged glances, as if something had dawned on them. They turned their gazes back to Shizue. Whatever had happened to Shizue, the final answers would have to come from him. At that moment, Shizue seemed to recall something and shouted toward Jiraiya. "Jiraiya-sama. I need to see the Hokage immediately. Denzo attacked me and tried to steal my Mangekyo Sharingan." But halfway through speaking, Shizue's expression darkened. He sighed and said, "My Sharingan must have already been taken. Maybe even the Hokage was involved in this. Since the Hokage's faction controlled me, why let me wake up again? Was it to humiliate us?" Shizue's words carried a massive amount of information, leaving Jiraiya, Kakashi, and the others momentarily stunned. Once they calmed down, they began focusing on the key points. Shizue said he was attacked by Denzo, who stole his Sharingan. That meant even before the Uchiha massacre, Denzo had already planned to strike against them, and he had gone straight for the most dangerous target. Second, Denzo's attack seemed to be an individual act, not something planned by the third Hokage. But the most critical piece of intel was this: if Denzo had attacked Shizue back then, was he also the mastermind behind Shizue's recent appearance? Could it be that Denzo had joined forces with Orochimaru to attack Tsunade? Jiraiya felt overwhelmed. If Denzo really had colluded with Orochimaru, then wasn't the death of the third Hokage also linked to him? The Hidden Leaf village crash a month ago was actually a civil war within the Hokage's own faction. Kakashi and Guy didn't have as much information, but seeing the look on Jiraiya's face, they sensed something major had happened to the village. To avoid disturbing Jiraiya, Kakashi and Guy began casually chatting with Shizue. Shizue looked at Kakashi, his expression complicated, and said, "Go ahead, how do you plan to humiliate me? Humiliate the Uchiha clan? I should never have trusted the third Hokage or any of the Hokage's men." Kakashi was silent for a few seconds, then said, "Shizue, the third Hokage sacrificed his life a month ago. He died in Orochimaru's attack while protecting Hidden Leaf village. The third Hokage is dead?" Shizue was stunned, then asked, "What about the Uchiha? Did any of my clansmen take part in this plan? They've always dreamed of becoming Hokage." Kakashi shook his head and said, "The Uchiha have long since been annihilated. The one who wiped them out was your friend, Itachi Uchiha. He killed every single Uchiha. That's impossible." Shizue stared at Kakashi. "Itachi would never raise his hand against our clan. He was the bridge between the clan and the village. Anyone else might do such a thing, but not him." Kakashi understood how Shizue felt, but still said calmly, "This is the truth. Itachi Uchiha chose an extreme path to prevent conflict between the village and the clan. He killed all the Uchiha. Except for one, his younger brother, Sasuke. The third Hokage is dead. The Uchiha clan is gone." Shizue sat down on the ground and muttered to himself, "I need some time alone to think. The shinobi world has changed too fast. It feels like I just had a terrible dream, and now that I've woken up, I'm forced to accept an even crueler reality." His eyes wavered. "I'm the only Uchiha left in the village. Except for Sasuke." Kakashi sighed and offered some comfort. "Shizue, maybe the Uchiha aren't completely wiped out. Back when I went to the Uchiha district to investigate, I noticed that more than half of the bodies were missing. There's a chance some might still be alive." Hearing this, Shizue grew more alert and looked sharply at Kakashi. For Kakashi to deduce part of the truth from back then. Should he say it's just what you'd expect from the Leaf's top tactician? His analytical skills were truly exceptional. Jiraiya, who had finally collected himself, walked over and placed a hand on Shizue's shoulder. "I can more or less guess what you've been through all these years. Once all of this is over, I'll stand up for the Uchiha. Denzo will get the punishment he deserves." As he said this, Jiraiya's eyes glinted with an uncontrollable killing intent. Just moments ago, he had pieced together Denzo's motives. Denzo must have collaborated with Orochimaru to become Hokage. Whether it was taking out the third or launching an attack on Tsunade, everything Denzo did was to clear his path to the Hokage's seat. As long as the third was alive, Denzo would never be Hokage, no matter what he did. After the third's death, The strongest candidates were Jiraiya and Tsunade. Since Jiraiya didn't want the job, Denzo's only real obstacle was Tsunade. Think about it, if Jiraiya refused the position and Tsunade were eliminated, Denzo would become the 5th Hokage by default. Facing someone like Denzo, who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals, Jiraiya no longer saw him as a comrade but as an enemy. To maintain peace in the village, Hidden Leaf Village needed institutions like the Anbu and Root to handle the dirty work, covertly monitoring enemies and launching counterattacks against enemy villages. But using those methods against their own people was utterly forbidden. For Denzo to betray the village and the will of fire just to become Hokage, he had to face justice. After a short pause, Jiraiya said, "Kakashi, Guy, go inform the Jonin squads. Tell them to assemble. There's something important we need to discuss." Receiving the order, Kakashi and Might Guy immediately left. Jiraiya glanced at Shizue and said, "Shizue, wait here with me. While we wait, I'll fill you in on everything that's happened these past years." Shizue nodded and gave a bitter smile. "Then I'll listen, Jiraiya-sama." At the same time, on the battlefield where Orochimaru and Tsunade were fighting. After stalling for long enough with his silver tongue, Orochimaru finally saw Denzo appear, along with his root operatives, launching an assault on Tsunade. Weakened as she was, Tsunade wasn't Orochimaru's match and was quickly driven into a desperate situation. Just as Orochimaru's Kusanagi sword was about to pierce Tsunade, Denzo hurled a wind-style shuriken infused with chakra, aiming directly at Orochimaru's arm. Sensing danger from the side, Orochimaru stepped back and parried the attack with his Kusanagi sword. With a metallic clang, Orochimaru's hand tingled from the force. Blocking a wind-style technique with brute strength was no easy feat. If not for the durability of the Kusanagi sword, it might have been severed right there. After rescuing Tsunade, Denzo coldly said, "Lady Tsunade, if you're not strong enough, don't push yourself. Someone with hemophobia like you is no match for Orochimaru. A traitor like him should be handled by Root." Even before his words finished, the Root shinobi behind him vanished and surrounded Orochimaru, ready to strike at any moment. Tsunade wasn't thrilled with Denzo, but since he had saved her just now, she decided to let it go for the moment. After that intense battle with Orochimaru, it seemed like her fear of blood had lessened. If given a bit more time, she might even overcome her phobia entirely. Wait a second. Was she forgetting something? Tsunade suddenly turned to look at Denzo. This was supposed to be a secret mission. After rescuing Shizune, the first person Shizune should have gone to was Jiraiya. Why had Denzo shown up first? Could Denzo have been watching her movements all along? She slowly exhaled, choosing not to dwell on the implications. Knowing that old perv, Jiraiya probably wandered off to peek at the women's baths again. If Shizune couldn't find him, it would make sense. For now, the priority was to team up with Denzo and defeat Orochimaru. If they could take down Orochimaru, they wouldn't just be avenging the 3rd Hokage, they'd also be able to free her grandfather and granduncle, who had been resurrected through summoning, impure world reincarnation. Just as Tsunade was about to fight alongside Denzo against Orochimaru, Jiraiya arrived with reinforcements. Seeing that Denzo was already engaged with Orochimaru, Jiraiya didn't strike immediately. Instead, he had his team lie in wait, biding their time for the perfect moment to strike. Chapter 392, Internal Strife in Hidden Leaf Village. Jiraiya was waiting for the perfect moment to strike, aiming to take down Orochimaru. As Orochimaru's eternal rival, he knew Orochimaru's strength extremely well. The two were equally matched, but Orochimaru had mastered the summoning, impure world reincarnation, allowing him to control the 1st and 2nd Hokage in battle. In the entire shinobi world, the only one who could take on both the 1st and 2nd Hokage at the same time was Byakuya. That's why Jiraiya had to find the right moment to swiftly defeat Orochimaru before he could use the summoning, impure world reincarnation to prevent the situation from worsening. A team of Hidden Leaf Village Jonin that had arrived as reinforcements were somewhat confused upon seeing this scene. They didn't understand why Jiraiya was hiding here. Tsunade and Denzo were already attacking Orochimaru together, since if they had just stepped in to support them, they might have had a chance to capture the traitor Orochimaru. However, considering Jiraiya's position as acting Hokage, they ultimately said nothing. Although Orochimaru had attacked the village and caused the death of the 3rd Hokage, this was still considered an internal matter of the Hokage's circle, something outsiders shouldn't meddle in. Noticing their stares, Jiraiya quickly explained what had happened. When they heard that Denzo had attacked and taken control of Shizue Uchiha and might have even helped plan the Hidden Leaf Village crush, the Jonin all wore expressions of disbelief. Weren't Denzo and Orochimaru both part of the Hokage's faction? How had internal conflict reached such a level? Shikakunara thought for a moment, then said, "Jiraiya-sama, Do you have any witnesses or evidence regarding Denzo-sama's betrayal of the village? Jiraiya waved his hand, signaling the nearby Anbu to remove their mask and stick out their tongue. When they clearly saw Shishui's face, his crimson Sharingan, and the cursed tongue eradication seal engraved on his tongue, the Jonin immediately grew more serious. The seal on Shishui's tongue was genuine, and Jiraiya wasn't the type to lie about such a thing. Most importantly, considering Denzo's aggressive stance toward the Uchiha, it wasn't hard to believe that he might have made a move against Shishui. After all, Itachi Uchiha, who personally annihilated his own clan, had numerous connections to Denzo. After exchanging glances, the Jonin all turned to Jiraiya, then looked toward Tsunade and the others in the distance. They understood that it was time to choose a side. Whether Jiraiya's words were valid, whether Denzo had really betrayed the village and colluded with Orochimaru, whether he had attacked Shishui Uchiha, none of that mattered anymore. What mattered now was their stance. Would they support Jiraiya or the leader of Root? Fortunately, this wasn't a difficult choice for them. Whether from an emotional perspective or from a standpoint of interest, they supported one of the legendary Sannin, Jiraiya. Jiraiya was a student of the third Hokage and a role model in Hidden Lee Village's history. He held the record for most S-rank missions completed and contributed significantly to the village. Though Denzo had also done much for the village, his contributions were always in the shadows. Most importantly, the Root organization targeted not only enemies but also Hidden Lee Village's own shinobi. No one liked an organization that might turn on them. Silently standing behind Jiraiya, they made their choice through action. On the battlefield. After forcing Orochimaru back with wind-style shuriken, Denzo launched several more advanced wind-style jutsu. The sharp wind turned into invisible blades, seeming to slice through space itself, keeping Orochimaru at bay. Even as his collaborator, Orochimaru had to admit Denzo's strength. Denzo's mastery over wind-style had reached perfection. It would be hard to find another shinobi in the entire world who could surpass him in wind-style, not even the Kazekage of Hidden Sand Village could match him. After retreating to create distance, Orochimaru began his performance. Frowning, he looked at Denzo and said, "Denzo, are you really going to stop me from taking Tsunade? Tsunade is your rival on the path to becoming Hokage. If you let me take her, you might become the 5th Hokage yourself." Already aware of the Hidden Lee Village shinobi lying in ambush behind him, Denzo righteously declared, "I would never resort to such despicable tactics to become Hokage. Even if I saved Tsunade, I can still defeat her fair and square inches the Jonin vote." Denzo spoke loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Upon hearing this, Tsunade showed a look of disbelief. Someone as shady as Denzo was actually saying such things? But she couldn't directly rebuke him since he had just saved her. The Hidden Lee Village shinobi in hiding also found Denzo's words insincere. It might sound fine coming from someone else, but from Denzo, it just felt wrong. And after listening to Jiraiya's explanation, they increasingly believed that Denzo and Orochimaru had planned this together, a performance meant to deceive them. After all, if Denzo hadn't made prior arrangements, how could someone as secretive as him be the first to appear here, saving Tsunade and fighting Orochimaru without hesitation? You had to remember, whether during the Nine Tails incident or the recent Hidden Lee Village crush, Root had always been the last to arrive on the battlefield. Once the seed of doubt was planted, it wasn't so easily erased. After righteously rejecting Orochimaru, Denzo launched another attack, all while keeping a close eye on the forest behind him, waiting for support from Hidden Lee Village. Several minutes later, Denzo sensed something was off. Had the Hidden Lee Village shinobi been attacked? Why hadn't they jumped out to assist him by now? Had Orochimaru laid out another plan? Thinking this, Denzo looked toward Orochimaru in the distance and frowned. In his mind, if the Hidden Lee Village shinobi weren't supporting him, it could only mean Orochimaru had interfered. Could something have happened to Shisui as well? But he had only ordered Shisui to pretend to be Orochimaru's subordinate to block Jiraiya. He should have been able to retreat within half a minute. Suppressing his doubts, Denzo continued his attacks on Orochimaru, keeping up the act. A few more minutes passed, and the Hidden Lee Village shinobi finally sprang into action. They surrounded Orochimaru from all directions and even set up a ceiling barrier. Orochimaru's expression changed slightly, and he immediately unleashed the 10,000 snakes formation to disrupt them. A horde of venomous snakes covered the ground, lunging wildly at the surrounding shinobi, trying to overwhelm them. Jiraiya didn't hesitate at all. He instantly used fire style. With Sage Mode enhancing it, Jiraiya's fire style was terrifyingly powerful. He obliterated the 10,000 snakes formation in an instant, turning all the venomous snakes into ash. Orochimaru's expression darkened, losing so many snakes at once hurt even him. Looking toward Jiraiya in the distance, Orochimaru gave a fake smile and said, Long time no see, Jiraiya. I didn't expect we'd meet again here. Why did you attack Tsunoda? Jiraiya questioned. Orochimaru answered nonchalantly. I needed Tsunoda's help for my experiments. Unfortunately, she refused, so I could only forcibly take her away. I just didn't expect her hemophobia to be so severe. Heck, she was defeated in an instant. Orochimaru's attitude made Jiraiya furious. His eyes widened in anger as he shouted. It was Tsunoda's choice to reject you. You had no right to force her, and I haven't even settled the score with you for what happened to the third Hokage. The old man? Orochimaru paused, then chuckled. No need to thank me. Letting Sensei die in battle as a hero of Hidden Leaf Village was my final gift to him as a student. Orochimaru then smirked. You wouldn't want the third to grow old and die in a hospital bed, would you? For a shinobi, dying of old age is a form of torment. A shinobi's fate is the battlefield, to go out in a blaze of glory. Jiraiya had to admit Orochimaru had a point, but that still didn't justify becoming an enemy of the third Hokage. He shouted at Orochimaru. Dying in battle may have been the old man's wish, but he would never have wanted to be taken down by the student he cherished most and a so-called friend scheming behind his back. That wasn't a glorious death. It was an assassination born of betrayal. Orochimaru tilted his head slightly, feigning confusion. Jiraiya. I'm not sure I follow. I left Hidden Leaf Village. Naturally, I'm now the enemy of Hidden Leaf Village. And enemies use any means necessary. You're still as naive as ever. I'm naive? Jiraiya scoffed coldly and lunged at Orochimaru. Seeing Jiraiya rush at him, Orochimaru quickly raised the Kusanagi blade to defend himself. He could feel that Jiraiya tonight was different, more powerful than ever, exuding natural energy. He must have entered Sage Mode. Sage Mode, the ability Orochimaru longed for, the ultimate form that even the cursed seal couldn't match. If he didn't fight cautiously, he might very well die at Jiraiya's hands tonight unless he used summoning, Impure World Reincarnation to summon the first and second Hokage. But after the last time he summoned them, Orochimaru had resolved not to use that technique lightly, especially not the Edo versions of the first and second Hokage. He could feel that the first Hokage might break free of his control at any moment, becoming a free-roaming summoning, Impure World Reincarnation. If that happened, the consequences would be unimaginable if he lost control over both. He didn't want to be hunted by the first and second Hokage for the rest of his life. As he watched the Hidden Leaf Village shinobi approaching, Denzo began to sense that something was off. Weren't those Jonin supposed to back up Jiraiya? Why were they walking toward him instead, and with a murderous glint in their eyes? Pushing aside his doubts, Denzo addressed them, saying, I'm not injured. You don't need to protect me. Go and support Jiraiya, we must capture Orochimaru at this time. For the time being, forget Orochimaru's identity. After killing Hiruzen, he's no longer a shinobi of Hidden Leaf Village. But the Jonin didn't react much. They simply stared coldly at Denzo. Their eyes said everything, they didn't trust him. What? What are you all doing? Denzo began to panic. His voice grew sharper, laced with anxiety. I'm Hidden Leaf Village's senior advisor. Are you trying to betray the village? Or are you all Orochimaru's spies? At his accusations and attempts to throw blame, the already disgusted Jonin squad hardened their resolve. They looked at Denzo in unison. Kakashi stepped forward and got straight to the point. Denzo, your conspiracy has been exposed. Jiraiya-sama saw through it all. We're here to arrest you. You can fight back, or you can surrender. But if you resist, we won't let you walk away with your dignity. Considering your age, we'd rather not make this painful for you. What conspiracy? You're all Orochimaru's spies trying to frame me. Denzo roared, pointing furiously at Kakashi. It's you, Kakashi. You must have manipulated Jiraiya to take revenge on me. But Kakashi's expression remained calm. Is that so? Well, I do want revenge. I won't deny it. You were the one who ordered Tenzo to kill me, weren't you? Kakashi then glared at Denzo. If it hadn't been for the third Hokage, I would have lost my Sharingan long ago, maybe even my life. You're spouting nonsense. I never gave such an order. Denzo's eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't believe Kakashi dared to bring up the past. You're just a merely Jonin. How dare you question someone like me, who commands the entire Root Division? Then it clicked, he looked toward Jiraiya in the distance and realized the truth. Kakashi had never dared to expose him before because Kakashi had no real authority or influence in the village. But now, with Jiraiya's backing, everything changed. Jiraiya might not control any military unit like Root. Still, as a disciple of the third Hokage and one of the legendary Sannin, he could easily rally a massive number of shinobi to his cause. That was the power he had accumulated over the years. Jiraiya. You really were hiding your claws. On the surface, you endorsed Tsunoda as the 5th Hokage candidate, but in reality, you're maneuvering to become Hokage yourself. You let Tsunoda embarrass herself in front of everyone to lower public opinion of her. Then you let Kakashi drag my secrets into the light, forcing me to step out of the race as well. With just a few calculated moves, you've eliminated every competitor for the 5th Hokage seat. No wonder you were the one who stayed closest to Hiruzen all these years. Your schemes are just as devious as his. Back then, it was that same fake humility that helped Hiruzen gain Obirama-sensei's favor and become Hokage. But if you think tricks like these are enough to take me down, you're underestimating me. Did you really think I didn't prepare for unexpected variables when working with Orochimaru? To prevent Orochimaru from turning on me, I've stationed a large number of root operatives nearby. Just give the order, and they'll take Kakashi down for sowing chaos, and the rest of the fence-sitters won't lift a finger to stop it. Chapter 393, Denzo surrounded and hidden Leaf Village's secrets. With that thought, Denzo suddenly felt he had the upper hand. As long as he gave the order to attack Kakashi, the situation would immediately turn in his favor. He might even join forces with Orochimaru and pin the blame for the assault on Hidden Leaf Village entirely on Jiraiya. However, when Denzo snapped his fingers, the root ninja hiding in the shadows did not show themselves. His expression darkened instantly. He scanned the surroundings, then turned his gaze to Kakashi and the others. Could it be that they had already neutralized his subordinates, leaving him completely isolated? Kakashi took a step forward, drew a kunai, and said coldly, "Denzo, are you waiting for something? Those root operatives hidden in the dark? Or perhaps Shizue Uchiha? Do you wonder how we knew of your betrayal? Or why we're here to arrest you?" Denzo's face turned unspeakably ugly. His eyes quickly locked onto Shizue among the crowd, now filled with panic. Shizue was his most powerful subordinate, and the only one whose will had been altered by Kotoa Mitsukami. With Shizue's strength, even the 3rd Hokage wouldn't be an easy opponent. Why had Jiraiya managed to capture him so easily and extract everything? At that moment, Denzo realized a terrifying possibility. What if Shizue had never actually been influenced by Kotoa Mitsukami? What if he'd been hiding by Denzo's side all this time, only waiting for the right moment to turn on him, and now, that moment had come? A chill crept up Denzo's spine. He had calculated everything so precisely. Yet in the end, he was outmaneuvered by an Uchiha. He had foolishly tried to use the very clan that Obirama-sensei had warned him about. Denzo looked at Shizue, then at the approaching Hidden Leaf Village ninja. The thought of fleeing sprang into his mind. If he were to fall into their hands, the consequences would be unimaginable, especially if they discovered he was holding Hiruzen Sarutobi captive in the root base. That would bring ruin to all his plans. Forming hand signs, he bit his finger and slammed it onto the ground. A puff of smoke erupted. He had summoned his summoning beast, Baku, hoping it would buy him time to escape and preserve a sliver of hope for a comeback. Baku was immensely powerful, no weaker than the massive beasts of the 3 great sage lands. With each breath, it unleashed violent wind-style techniques, toppling nearby trees. Even the ninja present struggled just to stay on their feet. Fortunately, the Hidden Leaf Village ninja here were all Jonin level. After adjusting to the initial wind pressure, they launched their counterattacks, unleashing high-level ninjutsu that bombarded Baku until it writhed in agony. Eventually, after suffering unbearable damage, Baku vanished as the summoning was forcefully ended. With the beast dealt with, everyone turned toward Denzo, only to see that he had already fled far, now just a tiny black speck in the distance. Among the Jonin present was a member of the Hyuga clan. Activating his Byakugan, he turned to Kakashi. "Denzo is heading toward the root base. Should we pursue?" Ordinarily, in a situation where Jiraiya was already engaged in battle, Shikaku Nara would be the most senior and qualified to lead. But everyone had just witnessed Kakashi's calm command and strength. Unconsciously, they were now looking to him for direction. Kakashi didn't hesitate. He issued his orders clearly. "Shikaku-san, you, Choza-san, and Inoyachi-san go support Jiraiya-sama. The rest, come with me to pursue Denzo." Shikaku glanced at Kakashi and nodded. "I trust your judgment. But Denzo once attacked Shizue, he might possess a Mangekyo Sharingan." Kakashi nodded slightly, then led the Hidden Leaf Village ninja in pursuit of Denzo. He was well aware that Denzo might possess a Mangekyo Sharingan. That was exactly why he had chosen to lead the pursuit himself. The Mangekyo was the ultimate high technique of the Uchiha clan, with each eye harboring a power that defied reason. For an ordinary ninja, defeating a Mangekyo wielder was almost impossible. Only those on the level of the legendary Sannin might be capable of doing so. Kakashi, while not one of them, happened to possess a Mangekyo Sharingan himself, putting him just close enough to that level. As Kakashi's back disappeared into the distance, Shizue, hiding in the crowd, curved his lips into a faint smile. Once they reached the root base and saw the extent of Denzo's crimes, public opinion about both the Uchiha and the Hokage faction would be completely reversed. He had planned for this moment for years, never daring to let down his guard for even a second. About 10 minutes later, the Hidden Leaf Village Jonin arrived at the root base. Seeing Denzo's figure approaching, the guards at the base immediately came forward to greet him. Denzo gave a small nod, then issued the order to block the pursuers. Though puzzled, the root guards obeyed the command. Soon, they spotted Kakashi and the others approaching. Confused looks appeared on their faces. Something was clearly wrong in the village. Why would so many Jonin be chasing after Denzo? After a moment's hesitation, the root ninja moved to block Kakashi's group. Kakashi gave them a glance, then gestured to Might Guy. With a shout of Hidden Leaf Village Whirlwind, Guy instantly dealt with the root operatives in their path. Though root members were elite, mostly seasoned Chunin or higher, selected with care and rigor, and could even resist Jonin when acting in coordinated squads, they weren't enough against Hidden Leaf Village's Jonin unit. After knocking them out, Guy casually removed their masks and bound them tightly with rope, ensuring they wouldn't be able to move when they awoke. As they moved deeper into the root base, they encountered more operatives. This time, some of the guards were root Jonin, fighters whose strength rivaled the elite. Even Guy struggled to subdue them quickly. In the end, it was only through the overwhelming numbers of Hidden Leaf Village's Jonin that they were able to bring them down. After defeating a root Jonin, Might Guy habitually removed the man's mask, only to freeze in place when he recognized the face beneath it. Someone who had bullied him and Obito back during their time in the academy was a familiar face from the Hidden Leaf Village police force. This man was an Uchiha. Why was an Uchiha Jonin working under Denzo? Could it be there was more to the Uchiha clan massacre than they'd been told? Guy's thoughts spiraled, but he couldn't find any solid answers, so he had to let it go. The other Jonin, however, all frowned deeply. They began connecting the fallen root Jonin with Shizue Uchiha, and reached a terrifying conclusion. The Uchiha clan massacre, on the surface, looked like Itachi Uchiha had lost his mind and, with help from outside forces, turned his blade on his own people. He had single-handedly exterminated the clan that once helped found the village. But in truth, the situation was far more complex than they had imagined. Denzo Shimura had been directly involved in the massacre, and had even taken the surviving Uchiha Jonin, brainwashed and controlled them, and turned them into operatives of root. The reason Denzo had cultivated so many hidden forces was simple: he wanted to seize power and become Hokage. Just a month ago, Denzo secretly contacted the rogue ninja Rasa and Orochimaru. The three of them worked together to devise a plan to bring down Hidden Leaf Village and successfully cause the death of the third Hokage. If it hadn't been for Byakuya from Akatsuki and the fifth Kazekage arriving in time to intervene, Hidden Leaf Village would have completely collapsed. Wait. A Hidden Leaf Village Jonin suddenly thought of another possibility. Maybe Orochimaru and Rasa's original intention in initiating the Hidden Leaf Village collapse plan wasn't actually to destroy the village, but rather to eliminate the third Hokage and, at the same time, create an opportunity for Denzo to emerge as a hero. Just imagine it, after the third Hokage's death, if Denzo had appeared in a heroic fashion to save Hidden Leaf Village, his reputation would have skyrocketed. Riding that wave of prestige, his chances of winning the fifth Hokage election would have been extremely high. But Denzo's betrayal of the village was simply too much. People could accept infighting and scheming during a Hokage election, even digging up dirt on each other to block opponents from being selected. But all of that hinged on one condition: the village's interests must not be harmed. Denzo's actions clearly went against the village's interests. Even if he somehow managed to become the fifth Hokage now, the damage done to the village would still be irreversible. The failure of the Chunin exams would cause the daimyo and nearby minor villages to start doubting Hidden Leaf Village's strength. The fact that the fifth Kazekage Rasa and Byakuya from Akatsuki had to step in and save Hidden Leaf Village didn't come without a price. Many treaties previously signed with Hidden Sand Village would now be nullified, and the village would be forced to give Hidden Rain Village more favorable terms. Pressing forward, Kakashi and the others soon arrived at the deeper parts of the root base. Finally, at the central cross-section of the underground hall, they cornered Denzo. He seemed to have given up on escaping and locked his sharp gaze on Kakashi, then suddenly asked, "Kakashi, do you remember the last time we met here?" Kakashi nodded and replied, "Of course I remember. Back then, you led Root Shinobi to block Yamato and me. If the third hadn't shown up in time, both of us would have died." "Yes, you would have died. That's the price of betraying me." Denzo sighed lightly and continued, "If you hadn't found Hiruzen Sarutobi, I would have already acquired the Sharingan and would-style KK Genkai. All the tragedies that followed would never have happened." Kakashi frowned, scoffing coldly. Turning on your comrades is a betrayal of the will of fire. Humphrey. Denzo snorted. The will of fire is nothing but a slogan, easily modified and casually wielded. Do you think Hiruzen Sarutobi was clean? He and I both treated the will of fire as a mere tool. These words made the surrounding Hidden Leaf village Jonin visibly agitated. They couldn't tolerate such defamation against the third. Kakashi, however, remained relatively calm. He knew the third Hokage wasn't a perfect shinobi. He had plenty of flaws. But no matter what, he was still a far better person than Denzo. Seeing their angry expressions, Denzo continued, before arriving here, you should have encountered those specialized root shinobi. They were all members of the Uchiha police force. They are my proudest creations. You're probably angry that I used cursed seals and Ganjutsu to control the Uchiha and make them serve root. But have you ever thought about who actually gave Itachi Uchiha the order to wipe out his own clan? Compared to ordering the annihilation of an entire shinobi clan, I was far more merciful. Pausing, Denzo continued. I saved these Uchiha remnants, who were supposed to be killed, and let them atone by guarding the village from the shadows. They carried on the responsibilities of the police force in darkness. Denzo's words left the Hidden Leaf village shinobi silent for a long time. They questioned the truth of what he said, whether the third Hokage had actually ordered the annihilation of the Uchiha. After some thought, they came to the conclusion that he probably did. The third must have issued some kind of directive. Otherwise, the Uchiha wouldn't have been eradicated so quickly. Those Uchihas scattered throughout the shinobi world didn't avoid returning to Hidden Leaf village because they feared other Uchiha. They were afraid of being eliminated by the third. With that thought, the Hidden Leaf village Jonin's reverence for the third Hokage dimmed a little. At that moment, Kakashi, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke up. Denzo, no matter how much you smear the third, it won't change your current situation. You betrayed the village and colluded with Orochimaru. That's undeniable. Undeniable? Denzo narrowed his eyes. What proof do you have that I colluded with Orochimaru? You're just choosing to believe Shizue Uchiha. You're believing Jiraiya's one-sided story. I have never done anything to betray Hidden Leaf village. In fact, your father's suicide back then was something Hiruzen Sarutobi couldn't be separated from. Tell me, why would a village that supposedly treasures the will of fire and the protection of comrades suddenly start pushing the belief that the mission matters more after Hidden Leaf village's White Fang failed his mission? Why did the very shinobi your father saved accuse him and then later die on the battlefield in Hidden Sand village? Kakashi's eyes grew colder as he stared at Denzo. What else do you know? Denzo's lips curled into a smile. He then said, I know a lot. Including even more mistakes made by the third Hokage. And evidence that Jiraiya betrayed the village. Mistakes by the third? Evidence that Jiraiya-sama betrayed the village? Upon hearing this, the Hidden Leaf village Jonin looked at each other in shock. They had only come to pursue Denzo, but now they were hearing one hidden secret after another. Tonight's events had been nothing short of explosive. First, Tsunade was ambushed. Then Shizue Uchiha returned from the dead. Then news broke that Denzo had conspired with Orochimaru to collapse Hidden Leaf village. And now they were hearing about the third Hokage causing the death of the White Fang. These were things none of them dared to even think about before, but now Denzo was laying them bare, one by one. And now he was even saying he had dirt on Jiraiya-sama. Could it be? Jiraiya really did something to betray the village?